when we're live, and I think we're live. Does it show that we're live?
Yeah.
You're live. All right, cool. Well, Julia, thank you for being here. I really appreciate your time, and I'm stoked to have like this long list of stuff in front of me that I want to talk about. I don't know that we're going to get to everything, but I'm stoked. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I wanted to actually start by telling you a story that I thought it was pretty amazing. Have you ever heard of the hypnagogic state?
No. Tell me, please. That sounds so cool.
It sounds really intimidating. So the hypnagogic state is actually a state between wakefulness and sleep. So like, I'm not sure if you're familiar, like sometimes so I have a lot of sleep disturbance. I've dealt with anxiety and panic a lot. And so I've had like sleep paralysis. I've had hypnagogic jerks. That's the feeling when you feel like you're falling and you wake up and you like maybe jolt or move your body. So the hypnagogic state is in between wakefulness and sleep. I started to look it up recently because when I go through panic, I have these experiences where they almost feel like psychedelic experiences in this state in between wakefulness and sleep, usually when I'm under high periods of stress. And so I started looking this up, and I guess creatives use this space to when they feel stuck, when they have writer's block. Like Thomas Edison used to fall asleep in his armchair with 2 metal balls, and as soon as he fell asleep and his arms relaxed, the balls would fall, he would wake up and he'd write stuff down. So I found this and I was like, wow, this is really cool. A lot of artists use this space when they have, blocks. And the other night, you and I were talking, and you told me that you just got selected for your TED Talk. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I want to do a TED Talk. I've been wanting to do one for so long, but I haven't felt the creative space or the creative thoughts to do one. Like, I don't know what I would talk about. Like, I have so much to talk about, but it's hard to narrow my focus. And that night, for something unrelated to the TED Talk, I was having a lot of stress and stuff. So I actually went through this weird hypnagogic state period where I was like sleeping and I felt like out of body experiences. So in this state, this is where people experience lucid dreaming, out of body experiences, hallucinations, sleep paralysis, but you typically don't remember because you move on to the next stage of sleep. But I was in and out. I actually had an experience where I was like, oh my gosh, like I feel like the DMT is like running through my body because I felt like I was like surrendering like on a roller coaster. It was really cool. But I woke up the next morning. I had about 2 to 3 hours of this state. And I woke up the next morning and I was like, I vaguely remember writing something down about a TED Talk, but I didn't really remember. So then I go to my notes in my phone. This is really interesting. So I go to my notes. Where is it? And I wrote down thoughts for a TED Talk. And this was like, I barely remembered. I mean, I remember it, but in that foggy space. And I wrote down, what if we associate moods with colors in the form of a meditation? Like, for example, hypochondria, feeling my physical state versus my emotional state as the color red versus the color blue, instead of them being intertwined in the color purple and getting confused. This is the reason all of the colors in the rainbow, when mixed, are brown or black. Having self-awareness around tangible feelings is helpful. Just determining how the bad feelings are different from one another and how the good feelings are different from one another. Pay attention to each of these feelings in your body and label them as colors. Think, I am red right now, and that is a different word than the actual emotion, so it removes the negative charge instead of I am anxious. Thinking of it as a choice, tell yourself, I am choosing to paint myself red right now to remove resistance as a manifestation.
Whoa, that is so cool.
Isn't that crazy?
That's so good.
I was like, wow, like what if I could do a TED Talk on associating emotions with colors and choosing to paint yourself with these colors to remove resistance? I was like, holy shit.
That's brilliant.
Isn't that crazy? I was like, you inspired it by telling me about your TED Talk, and I had this weird hypnagogic state.
Yeah.
Boom. So now I'm like, maybe we should I should experiment more with this weird state in between sleeping and wakefulness. It was just, I was like, I had to share that to because I want to talk about your TED Talk.
Oh my gosh. You know, that's so interesting because I think I'm getting feedback on your computer. Or no, maybe I'm not.
Are you?
No.
Are you good? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I know, I'm good.
Okay. All right.
You know what's interesting is people are like so out of touch with their emotions. And sometimes if you can just come back to a color or something that's simple and easy to get everything that's going around in your mind, like all the shit that's around you, and come back to a color, like that is the most brilliant idea I've ever heard of. It's a really great concept.
Simple meditation, right? I talked in the last podcast about I live by a train, and I simply what I try to do throughout the day is hear the train and being able to be slow enough to just hear the train come by, because when I'm busy and I'm running and I'm just in my stuff, I don't hear it. But the littlest things that we can come back to, like you just said, like color, touching something in front of you, like petting my dog. Yeah, people just aren't as in touch with their emotions these days, and I feel you on that. So to go into your TED Talk, because that is amazing, fantastic. Yeah. I was celebrating the other night in the car when you told me, or when I saw your story, and I'm like, she got it. Like, I was so excited. So what, I don't know if you can talk about it. Can you talk?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, cool. So tell me more, because you told me a little bit, and I was excited to hear the concept about peas. Because I love when people take something very simple, like I guess I like it because I did that with colors, right?
Yeah.
Something very simple and turn it into something very metaphoric, beautiful, and something that explains a bigger concept. So explain a little bit about, one, the concept you're talking about, and two, I'm very curious to hear the process with TED and how that went for you, and like the application and all that.
Yeah, for sure. So I went to a college called Hamline University. And about a month ago, I got an email saying, no, not a month, maybe a couple months ago, that I got an email saying, we're having a TED Talk at Hamline. It's a TEDx event. And if you want to apply. So I'm like, well, what the heck? Why not? Like, I'm trying to do things this year that make me feel very scared. I want to do for me and away from fear my entire life. Like, I get scared and I run. And part of this year, like I've gone through like intense therapy. I've done a lot of stuff. And one of the things that I've like vowed to do for myself is to run towards the fear. So I got this email and I'm like, what do I have to talk about? And I just got a job working for a pea protein company, and I've been studying plants and plant-based medicine and how we can incorporate that into our lives. And after doing a lot of research, you know, I'm working for a company that's really, really, really doing things the right way in terms of food. I never knew anything about where my food came from until I started working at this corporation. I had no idea. I mean, most of us have no idea where our food comes from. So, and I mean, we can say like, you know, our food comes from Mexico, but we don't really know like the processing and the handling and where it all goes and where it gets processed. I mean, like most of the time things are grown in China, they're shipped to some other place to be processed and then shipped to the United States, which is like totally not sustainable. So I'm sitting there thinking like, as a person who's going plant-based and as a person who considers themselves vegan, and I'm saying I want to go vegan because I'm sustainable, like there's a lot of things that are not sustainable about being vegan. Even almond milk, like drinking almonds is not sustainable. It's not like, if we're looking, I mean, you live in California, Northern California, aren't you guys like having a ton of issues with almond growth in California and how much water it requires? And so I started thinking about, first of all, that there's certain ways to do things, and peas are a really great way to be sustainable, but not only be sustainable, be regenerative. And so what regenerative means is that you want to restore the earth that you're using. So sustainability is saying like, okay, well, let's just make sure it doesn't get any worse. But if we look at where we're at in terms of global warming and climate change, like we're in a pretty shitty place. So just sustaining this right now is not going to work in the long run. And so what the idea is to restore the natural environment to a point and then sustain it. So I started thinking about that and how peas are nitrogen fixating. And so when you grow them, what they do is they actually heal the soil and they put nitrogen into the soil. And so what that does is the next time farmers grow crops, their crops actually grow better. They're double in size and they don't have to use as much nitrogen. And so there's not as much tillage, there's not as much soil erosion. So peas are great in terms of growing them. But also peas are great because of their health aspect or their health benefits. So peas actually are one of the oldest crops in the world. And have you heard of blue zones before?
No.
So Blue Zones is a study that looks at people around the world that are over 100 years old. And they're kind of like pockets of communities where people live to be over 100. And they go to those communities and they study what they're doing along, and they want to look at their longevity. And they look at these Blue Zone studies, and one of the main predictors of health incomes is in intake or consumption of legumes or peas. And so peas are for you, and they're really, really good for you. And they are full of protein. They're full of fiber. They're low in fat. I mean, they're a great, great, great crop, and they're cheap. So one of the issues that we're having is food instability, and people are not getting the food that they need. They're not getting access to the food that they need, and they're not getting it at an affordable price. And so peas are one of the cheapest crops compared to like meat or another protein source. They're one of the cheapest crops in the world. And so that's kind of what led me to my talk, is that peas will save the planet, and that, no matter how small we are, we can make a difference by choosing to incorporate more peas into our diet.
See, it's so interesting. Like, I had no idea of like anything you just said. So like, wow, thanks for sharing that with me. I've never heard of the term blue zones, but I've heard of this place in like Greece, I think it is, where people live to be like over 100. I mean, that's, like there are these little communities where people live very long. What's so interesting is like, I've been on this search for like years. It feels like I've tried so many different things. I've tried like the paleo diet. I've tried vegan. Right now, it's interesting. I love your perspective on the sustainability, because I'm not vegan, but I technically eat plant-based if you look at the language, because most of what I'm eating is plants. I do eat meat from time to time, but so the plant-based versus vegan, first of all, I'm not even sure if those two things are interchangeable terms. So that's a good question I want to ask you. But then you hear things of like legumes being largely largely inflammatory foods. Like you hear like people that are for the keto diet talk about legumes and how much they cause inflammation. I feel like they kind of inflame my gut, but then at the same time you hear of their benefits. So it's like really hard to figure out what's optimal, what's best. But I appreciate your perspective on sustainability and regeneration and restorative, because like I've always, when I think of vegan, I think it's like an intense word for some people, even myself sometimes, because there are some people that go vegan and just like don't really even understand what they're doing and the food choices that they're making. And then they go out and they shame people. Like I've been personally shamed online for like, not being vegan. And I think it's understanding what individual food choices that you're making, accepting responsibility for those choices, but understanding what they're doing, for the environment. There's so many different arguments. Environmental sustainability, there's the moral side of things, there's the science argument in our bodies, right? What's optimal for our bodies. So there's so many angles. But so plant-based and vegan, is that technically the same thing?
Yeah, so that's a really, really great question. And to me, I think it's the same thing. I like to go by whole food plant-based. That's like really ridiculous. And some people are like, what the hell does that? So sometimes I just say vegan for the ease of it. But I think from my understanding, there's like no definition of plant-based. Some people are plant-based and totally vegan. Some people are plant-based and what they call flexitarian. So they eat like you, sounds like how you eat. You eat mostly plants and incorporate, some meat when you can, or when you want to. And so there's like a huge definition, but sometimes I try to stay away from vegan, because you're absolutely right. I get the big like X when I say vegan. People just like totally, completely turn off to me. And it's kind of a bummer, because I really want to have like an open dialogue. And I really think it's important that we have this back and forth, because like they have so much to teach me and I have so much, we have so much to give each other. And So I try to say whole food plant-based just so people will say like, what is that? Because otherwise if I say vegan, they're like, oh, fuck, Jesus. Like, oh, we don't want to talk to this kooky lady.
Yeah,
So
I saw something online last night. I watched this video about this guy who's basically said the term plant-based was invented because people are so triggered by vegan that like when you see a study when you see a study done that says like, you know, something with vegan in the title, people won't even read it because they just are like, this is propaganda, this is PETA, this is, you know, agenda based, whatever. But what if it says plant-based, people are more likely to click on the study and actually read it. And I was like, wow, like I even find myself being a little triggered by the vegan word. And I tell myself that so I can say it. And like, I like to have these open conversations about things because I feel like they're important and we need to have them.
Super important. And that's so funny because plant-based is like the biggest trend of 2019. I mean, if you look at the data, because one of the parts of my job is to look at data in terms of market data in the food industry. And in places like Asia, plant-based, just that term has shot up about 400%. I mean, it's taking over the world. And it's just funny that like it's kind of like a covert way of saying vegan. But I mean, in the end, the whole like goal of it, right, is just to get people to make healthier, more sustainable, friendlier choices, I guess. But I really like the way that you approach your thoughts around food and also like the philosophy around food. I saw on your Instagram the other day, you had posted a video about, I think it was on Joe Rogan when they were talking about, you know, vegans say, like, I don't want to hurt animals, but the farming practices are very harmful, like even in harming in fruits and vegetables, because you have to destroy habitat and all that stuff. And I thought, wow, that's a really interesting perspective.
Yeah,
and
I got a lot of riffraff for that one because it's, you know, the people it's like the video itself was a little harsh. It was harsher than I would have said it, but it made the point. And then I was hoping that people would read my caption because that's what I think. It's not me speaking that, right? It's what I think about. There's so many different angles for that we can look at things. Like it's, and the biggest thing that I wanted to take away from that was that I think people see some people, propaganda like, you know, vegans don't hurt animals, very simple thing, or the vegans save the animals, and then they just roll with that without doing their own research and understanding everything behind all the different practices of food. And it was like, I'm pro education, pro learning, pro understanding. That's why I want to have these conversations, but people get really upset when you say anything like against their ideology.
I thought that was brilliant though, because I think it gets people, I think oftentimes when you have when you start to adopt a vegan lifestyle, it's really easy to fall into like, I'm better than you and shame on you. And that's not a progressive way to think about things.
Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think people, why is it like this uptick? And like when I look at food on Instagram, it's like everything now you slap vegan on it. It's like vegan this, vegan this, vegan this. It's like this word that's almost used in a superior way to show like I'm better than you if you're not vegan. And I'm not sure where this craze is really coming from.
It's so interesting. You know, I really think about that too. And I think a lot of it has to come with we're all just really wanting to, we're kind of living in this like really interesting era of people wanting to show that they're doing good and like shame other people for their choices.
Like virtue signaling?
Yes, it's virtue signaling to its finest. That's exactly what it is. And the crazy part is that I had a conversation with somebody. I was my mentor in yoga, Matt Portwood. He's a brilliant, brilliant guy. And he told me there's this practice in yoga. It's one of the 8 limbs of yoga. It's called ahimsa. And basically what it talks about is doing the least harm possible while also understanding and accepting that everybody is harmful. And I think that's a really, really good point because like I own an iPhone, right? These things are mined by children in a country in Africa. And I'm saying here, like, I'm vegan, rah, rah, like I'm not hurting people while I'm using an iPhone. Like that's fucked up. And so it's like, who am I to say that I'm better than thou because I eat meat? Like, no, that's bullshit.
or it's like people that are like anti-capitalism and then they use these things like developed like by Apple. It's like really.
That's still, it's like, it's so funny. And it's like, you know what it is? I really think it's like, we want to identify with something so bad. Like, I want to identify with something so bad. So I'm vegan and I can't be anything else besides vegan. And I've like fallen in this trap so many times where like, without vegan, I'm nothing. I'm not anything. Or like, without this job, I'm nothing. But it's really just incorporating and learning and not being closed off and realizing that like we're all doing things. Same thing with sustainability. Like I drive a car.
I know.
Cars are bad. Not over here preaching.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
No, I was just going to say it's all these little decisions that we are so mindless about sometimes. Like we don't even understand the conveniences of our own life and all the stuff that we have. We are so conditioned to be comfortable and have all of these conveniences that I don't even think we understand the consequences or what is happening in the back end of all of these conveniences that we have, you know, computers and all this technology and Wi-Fi and cars. I mean, all this stuff that you're saying too. And it's easy to just fall into like a blanket statement to make ourselves feel better. I actually am having somebody on the podcast soon. She was the wellness expert behind Super Size Me.
Oh, no way. How
Alex
cool.
Jamieson. And she's coming. I'm trying to get her on. She agreed to it, but we're still kind of in conversations. And she was actually vegan for so many years. And she really believed everything, you know, like the sustainability and all that stuff. But what happened to her, she started getting some significant nutritional deficiencies, and she would go to her doctor and she was supplementing, she was eating all this, you know, algae and she was doing everything she possibly could. She started to research like all these different exotic plants and things to try to help her deficiencies for like over a year. And then what started happening was she would go out to lunch with her friends and they'd order like a salmon salad, and she started actually physically like salivating and drooling. And she felt like her body was just craving that meat because she didn't have that. She was having all these deficiencies, and she decided to introduce meat in a very small scale back into her diet. All the deficiencies went away. She started feeling way better, but her community, I mean, just completely ate her alive for not being vegan anymore.
Wow.
And they just shamed the hell out of her. And I wanted to hear her story behind that, because it's like, I feel like that was an individual decision that she made for her own life and her own health. She really, like, she has this amazing story on her blog about it where she detailed everything that she was doing. She tried so hard, but her body was not accepting it. And I was like, good for you to make that decision for yourself, for your body, for your optimal well-being. But so many people couldn't see it that way. And it was so fascinating to me. Like, why? Like, so I guess the community, if I'm understanding it correctly, preferred her to be sick and still, right? Like,
isn't that crazy? Like we just cling to these like ideas of ourselves and would rather somebody suffer than like change their mind. Like, it doesn't make any, you know, it's really interesting because I took this plant-based nutrition certification program through Cornell University. And I learned a lot in that time. And one of the things that I learned is that we're telling people to go vegan, but we're not giving them the tools to actually like build a great nutrition. When we go to our doctors only get like 20 hours of nutrition counseling in their entire, on average, in their entire.
I was gonna say they get that much because I thought it was less than that actually.
Yeah, but so this is crazy. I've got a girlfriend who's in medical school right now, and she's in her 3rd year, but her 1st and 2nd year, she had about 60 hours of lecture a week and then would spend extra time like reviewing that lecture. So if you're thinking out of that week, that's only a third of 1 week of the entire year. Like and then how are they supposed to, I mean, they're supposed to remember. I mean, it's insane how much they're supposed to remember. And then we go to our doctors and we look at them like, please help me figure out how to be healthy and give me healthcare advice and give me food advice. And they don't know what to give you. And so we're not really setting up like people who are going plant-based, like we're not really setting them up to be in a good position. And then it's a lot of work too.
Yeah, especially like I remember when the What the Health documentary came out, there are two girls at work that wanted to go vegan, but like one of them straight up like ate Pop-Tarts and like
Oh no.
like just like she would be like, oh, we got like this, like we're having a vegan dinner, but it would just be like pasta and bread and like
Yeah.
stuff, right? And I'm just like how are people thinking this is healthier? But you can't blame them because they don't know, because they hear go vegan, they Google what is vegan, there's a list of foods like you can eat whatever, and then they eat it and they're like, I'm vegan. But it's like, is that healthier? Is that more sustainable?
Yeah.
No, it's not. But they just don't know. There's no education like you're talking about in the medical system. There's no education of, I'm so excited to talk about the gut because you want to talk about the gut.
I love guts. Yeah.
I love guts too. Like, oh my gosh, I love it. I love that we have this synergy here, but they don't know. Doctors don't know.
No, I mean, unless they've done like extensive nutrition counseling. I mean, even like nobody really knows. That's the thing. And that's what I tell everybody is just like, listen to your bodies. Like we're so trying to like read this or hear that or talk to this expert or go on this diet trend, but we're not like listening to our bodies at all. Like if you're doing something and you're feeling like shit, I mean, I'm saying like give whatever you're trying time, because with a lot of things our bodies have to detox from all the shit that we've eaten. And so give your body time, but then after that, if your body's not like responding, don't do it. And then like that woman that you're talking about, good for her. Like so many people go through their lives not listening to their bodies, and then like 20 years later end up developing something like heart disease or some stress-related illness because they just didn't listen to their bodies, and their bodies are telling them. And just like I'm a big advocate for like fresh local produce that's in season, that hasn't traveled around the world to get to you, because it's not as nutritious, it's not as healthy. And I would honestly recommend eating frozen foods because they're better than just eating crap.
So talk about that. So I want to hear about both of those things. So I never even really thought of the concept of food traveling around the world and it losing its nutrients or losing its health benefits. I mean, but that makes total sense when I think about it like that. So is it just in transit that this food is sitting maybe in different temperatures for longer periods of time and it's touching more hands? Is it more processed, or what's happening there?
So on average, I might be messing with the number by like a couple days, but I think it takes like 31 days for your food, probably greater than that, to get to the grocery store. So you're picking the fruit or the vegetable 31 days before it's actually ripe. And then it's being transferred, you know, from wherever across the country. I mean, we get a lot of our food from Mexico. We get a lot of our food, depends on where you get your food from, you know, and where it's coming from. But even local, not really local, but I would say in California, you know, taking it to get to Minnesota. I mean, takes a while. And in consuming that food is not as nutritionally valuable than consuming something that you just picked off the tree, right? I just picked an apple off the tree that's ripe, it's full of nutrients, it's ready to go. And that's why, and oftentimes like frozen peas, for example, are more nutritious than like sugar snap peas that have been shipped from wherever to your store, unless it's a local food. If it's a local food, it's very nutritious because in terms of it being frozen, it's been picked and then probably immediately frozen.
So it keeps all of those properties that it had right when it was freshly picked.
Yes. And so oftentimes they say, Dr. Greger is a really, really interesting physician who's done a lot in this like food science or food about how if you don't have access to fresh local fruits and vegetables, try to eat frozen fruits and frozen vegetables, because the nutritional value is probably going to be better than that like pineapple that you bought from Hawaii that was shipped here, or Mexico that was shipped here, and it's not even ripe when it's sitting in the grocery store, and then you have to wait for it to ripen even more. I mean, it's just it seems like common sense, but it's really not. Like that didn't make sense to me until I read it, and I was like, oh yeah, that probably makes sense.
This totally makes sense, and it actually it coincides with what I just started the plant paradox. I don't know.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
So it makes sense because like, for example, you have like a fruit tree and the tree wants her seeds to be planted elsewhere. So what the tree will do is it signals for animals to eat the fruit by turning a certain color. So that's when you have ripe fruit.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like when an apple turns ready to be eaten, like if it's like a red apple, for example. But let's just say it's green before that. So the green is signaling like, no, I'm not ready to be eaten. And then I think it's even, somebody may have to fact check me on this, but I think it's even secreting certain chemicals inside of itself to like prevent it from being eaten because it doesn't want to be eaten. Like there are different fruits and different vegetables do different things. There's different mechanisms, but it's not good to eat fruit that's not fully ripe. And so I'm thinking, you know, when these fruits and vegetables have to be picked like 30 days in advance, like they're picked in a not like nowhere near optimal state, you know. And then like you're saying, you have to wait for them to be ripe, like in the store you get them when they're not ripe and everything, and it's just that's not good. And it makes so much sense to me when I look at that research.
Yeah, it really does. You know, it's crazy. And it's also really crazy because like it's such a privilege to talk about getting like local fresh foods. And like for many people, their only options are like group 1 carcinogens to eat. Like that's the only option some people have, is that's the closest grocery store to them is just full of group 1 carcinogens. So I think it's like such a privilege to be able to talk about this. But like,
what do you mean by group 1 carcinogens?
Yeah, so like processed meats are group 1 carcinogens. There's a lot of things that are full of glyphosate. Glyphosate is a group 1 carcinogen. That's the pesticides that they're throwing on all our fruits and vegetables that a lot of us can't get washed off.
That would be like conventional, conventionally grown stuff.
Yes, and there's like a top 10 list that you can Google of like foods that you should always buy organic, because there's like, even if you wash them, you're still consuming that glyphosate, and that glyphosate is a group 1 carcinogen. And with processed meats, that's a group 1 carcinogen, like bacon, like sausage, like a lot of the stuff that you see at like a local kind of like corner store. I mean, we have them all over in Minneapolis. They're just these like little corner stores. They have maybe a little bit of produce, but it's not organic. It's not local. They have just processed meat, crap, shit, and those are their options. Like, and there's no judgment when I say that, but like, if you eat, and it comes back to your point of like talking about when you go vegan, eating Pop-Tarts, like if you eat shit, you're gonna feel like shit. It doesn't matter if you're vegan. It doesn't matter if you're eating meat. It doesn't matter if you're paleo. It doesn't matter if you're keto. Like if you eat shit, you're gonna feel like shit. And it's a bummer, and it's like super, super disturbing to me that like that corner store for some people is their only option, and that they're like limited to those choices. And so I just always like to like remind myself that it's such a privilege to have this conversation, because like, and yeah, it's just so interesting. Like our food system really needs some work.
There are so many systems I feel like that need work. I feel like we are just lacking education, and that's why I'm so grateful to have this platform. Like my husband and I were talking last night about how this is the new television. I mean, people are getting their information now from podcasts or videos on YouTube, and to be able to actually speak truth about things that are going on that I feel like are just not prioritized because of other agenda or reasons or profit or things. I mean, it's crazy to me, all of the things that I've realized over the course of the last couple of years, diving into my own personal journey with food and research, and even the cancer industry and all this stuff. And I'm like, it's shocking and terrifying that this stuff is not like put on billboards outside.
Yes, it's like your whole life is a lie. Like up until this point, it's like, what? There's so much to unlearn.
I know. And I think it really goes into education behind the food choices. So it's like you're saying, like knowing what foods are going to cause harm. Like I have been doing a lot of research lately on like ethical hunting and hunting practices behind like controlling certain animal populations and the sustainability behind that, things that I never even understood before. Like I was like, thinking like, oh gosh, like, killing an animal or something is just bad. But like, I never had any information behind that. Like, I just was like, oh, a fuzzy bear in its habitat, or whatever. And I never had any more information other than that. But then when you look at certain things like population control, the wild pigs, I think in Texas that just destroy farms and stuff. And they're like, I mean, I don't know if there's a better way to do this. I don't necessarily like the visual I get when I think about this, but they're hiring people right now in helicopters to like shoot these pigs, from the air because they're such a problem for farmers because that's our food source, right? As a nation. And I don't think people think about that a lot. And there's methods behind the madness in some cases. Some cases are awful. Like I'm not a fan of trophy hunting, for example. I don't understand it. I don't see, I mean, collecting animals and it's weird. I just don't understand it. But when you look at certain practices like hunting for food or hunting for animal population, there are certain reasons that make sense. And I think it's spreading this education, having these talks back and forth and seeing what really makes sense for us as a whole collective and personally and what doesn't, and trying to move forward.
Absolutely. Oh, that's such a great point. And just being aware. Like, I have a lot of conversations with people because I do think it's important for people to understand, like, what happened for that like bacon to get on your plate, and not in like a very triggering way, but in just a way of like, listen, your bacon on your plate was like, we know the deal. Like the pig was in a really shitty situation and then it had to be like killed, and pigs are really emotional animals, and then blah, 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 right? We're going down the timeline. And there are a lot of people that will go, and I used to do it because I used to love meat. Like that was my kryptonite. So it was crazy. Like when someone would start to tell it, I had a sister who was vegetarian and she would start to tell me, like, as I'm eating my food, like, this is what happened to that. And I was like, fuck you, like, shut up and let me just enjoy this. But I didn't realize at that time that I was like totally pushing away like an opportunity to be more aware.
Yes.
And like, that is huge. And it's the same thing with like our avocados. Like avocados right now are oftentimes not coming from from a humanitarian perspective, the most wonderful place. I mean, so there's a lot of immigrants right now, or not immigrants, I'm sorry, excuse me. There are a lot of, there are in California and in other places they're growing it, that there are a lot of immigrants that are basically picking avocados for like next to nothing and being exploited. I mean, a lot of people in agriculture are exploited, even the farmers. Like we could go on forever about that, but there's a lot of people that are being exploited for me to get an avocado on my toast. And I have to be aware of that too. Like I can't, it's the whole picture. And that's why it's like, we all have to be aware. And also like the animals that we've hurt, like just to be aware of it and then make choices based upon that and trying to just live like the best life for you. That's really all it's about.
Yes, 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 and yes to that. It's awareness. You said, like, you hit it on the head. It's every single moment that you're pushing away some sort of, well, first of all, okay, so there's so much knowledge being thrown at us, right? Every single day. It's unbelievable. There's so much knowledge being thrown at us, but one, you have to understand the source of where the knowledge is coming from, because not all sources are good, right? You don't want somebody screaming in your face that you shouldn't be eating that meat. It's like nobody can receive that. Like that's not a platform. But if you have a reasonable platform that is educational, that is providing some sort of knowledge to you, and you choose to look the other way, like you said, that is a moment that you could have grown your awareness a little bit more, even if it doesn't change your mind, even if it doesn't change your decision in that moment. It's that little piece of information that you put inside of yourself. It's a seed that you carry with you. And we build on all of these seeds as we go on and on and on and on. Like I was watching something last night about like cows and like the butchering of cows or whatever. And I was watching, and they were saying like there's a lot of really unethical practices around that right now, but some farms do it right. Some farms have their cows grazing. Some farms don't have their cows in isolation at all, and right until they go in for butchering. That's a thing. So it's like is that better than the alternatives? Yes. So it's like if you still want to eat meat, you choose these ethical farms over the farms that are not doing it right. And if we did that as a collective, we could slowly move away from the unethical practices. But it seems to be like an all or nothing with a lot of people. But I personally think we should be moving in better directions collectively, and that would help everybody.
Yes, almost like how our grandparents used to eat. You know, like people are buying locally, they're buying from a person that they know or a family member. I mean, I know that that's sometimes not the easiest option, but there are in Minnesota, like I could probably drive a half an hour and get to somebody where I could buy a cow. And the cow was raised ethically, it was raised kindly, and I'm a huge advocate for that. Unfortunately, I also think that like this, and I think for those who are enlightened to that, right? But the problem is getting people even to that stage of like buying ethically and caring ethically. Like I talk to so many people who like, you know, give a shit about where their food comes from, but that is really honestly, and I'm not saying this to be judgmental or unkind, that's a minority thought. Like not very many people feel strongly about where their food comes from. And you know, there's like people now that are saying like hormone-free chicken, right? Like, well, great, hormone-free chicken. Well, years ago, the FDA changed regulations so that they can still inject them with hormones and call them hormone-free. They just are using different hormones. And so there's a lot of things, or like chickens are plumped up with like saline. Like there's a lot of things, and companies are capitalizing on the fact that we don't know. Mm-hmm. And so knowledge, I think, to your point, is like the most important thing, is learning about it and taking the time to learn about it. But if you don't care, like, I guess you don't have to care. But there is like the standard American diet is not sustainable.
See, it's interesting though. It's like, I don't think a lot of people care either, but why is that? Is it because we're just so conditioned to be convenient of like, I don't have to care. We have so much food that we can go down to the store and get meat. And it's like, oh, it's extra work to research your meat source. It's extra work. But then you have this population of, like we're talking about, growing vegans that seem to care a lot. So it's like, where are they then in the research process? Like what's happening?
I think I had somebody say to me a few years ago, like, there's this growing consciousness, like the world is becoming more conscious. And I was like, 2 years ago, I was like, okay, I don't know what the fuck that means, like, whatever. But now I kind of feel that. I feel like we're moving to a place where like we're becoming more aware. We're becoming more aware of everything around us and kind of the bullshit that's happening behind the scenes. And the second thing that I want to say is that we had a woman come in who works for some dairy association in Michigan. She's a registered dietitian, and her job is to go around to schools and instruct parents and kids and coaches and teachers to feed kids chocolate milk. As a registered dietitian, that is her job. Yep. So the milk industry, isn't that crazy? The milk industry is paying registered dietitians to go in and talk about chocolate milk and why it's great. And I don't know, like, for people that don't know about chocolate milk, it contains casein, which is a very dangerous protein. It's a protein related to animals, and it's been shown in a lot of studies. One of the biggest biomedical studies done ever in the world is called the China study. And it was studied on this protein called casein, and found that there are increased rates of heart disease, cancer. Basically, all the top 10 killers in the world are basically related to this casein protein.
So casein, is that so that's found in chocolate milk and not regular milk? What is it
found
about?
In milk. It's found in milk in general. So like I'm kind of like anti-dairy is just like, I feel like dairy is not great. But in addition, chocolate milk is full of sugar, like added sugar shit. And we're giving that to our children and getting them addicted early on. And I really think it's what companies are doing to target the youth. Because then you get us not to care early.
The fluoride in your at school when it's like, I remember when like I would go, I swear, I don't even know if this is real because I was so young and I wasn't conscious, but I feel like it's like there was like the fluoride day where you would like go,
Yeah.
they would take you out of class in like little groups and you would go and straight up get fucking fluoride put in your mouth. What the
Yes.
fuck?
Isn't that crazy? It's just insane. And the thing is so, you know, I'm talking because we have this woman, we have people come into our job all the time because we're kind of like trying to shake up the system where I work. And we had this woman come in and we're talking to her, and you know, we know our stuff, so we're asking her questions because like it was crazy to me how she had gotten herself to believe. I mean, she's a brilliant woman. She was intelligent. She told us that she had offers to do research at like Harvard, at Baylor, like huge nutrition research institutions. And then she had this job offer at Milk Industries. And we asked her like, what is the difference? She said, people getting the money to come into our schools and tell our teachers who are overworked and busy and probably are like, okay, yeah, you're an expert. I trust you. Please let us. Same with parents. Like parents are busy. They don't want to have to do all this research. They just want somebody who looks like they're trusting and knowledgeable and loving to come in and tell them what to do. And I would be the same way if I had kids. And so we have people that are like just getting like perpetuating this cycle of misinformation. And then we're going out and living our lives. And we're like screwed then at that point.
Yeah. I mean, oh man, help us all. It's like,
I know.
I don't even know what to say with that because I don't even know how to interject in the cycle. I don't even know how to go in and fix it because it's like people are so quick to, I mean, there's still, I was talking about this, I forget if it was my last podcast or just in conversation, but it's like there is a certain group of people, and more so like the older generation, but that don't even really understand that propaganda exists. So you have people that don't even understand the concept of propaganda and that not everything that you see out there is truth, right? That there's agendas behind things. And that is so scary.
Yes.
It's so scary because I read all of these, like you can really tell, like before I didn't, you know, when I wasn't really doing a lot of research, sometimes I would fall victim to like something like an article said, but now I can really spot one when there's like a lot of emotion and agenda behind something. And it's like, even with cannabis, like there's so many things written about cannabis that's just so bad. And it does this and this. And like, oh, there's a story of someone that like, you know, what they like to do now is they'll like write a story about synthetic cannabis, which is not good because it's synthetic cannabis. I mean, hello, like that's the name, but they'll just say cannabis. So they like introduce it maybe really quickly as synthetic cannabis. And then they'll talk about how someone like went crazy and like killed himself and did all this other stuff on cannabis. But then it's doing something to your brain where you're starting to associate cannabis with all these negative stories.
Yes.
But that's not true. And there's so many sources out there that do this with food. They do this with pharmaceuticals. They do this with, you know, natural cures like turmeric and other things. And it's so frightening because, like you said, people are busy and then they just want the information. You're scrolling mindlessly on Facebook and then you see something and it's like, oh, and even if you don't read the whole thing, it just plants a seed in your mind and then you roll with that. And it's scary as fuck.
Yes, it's so scary. It's like almost unfathomable that it's happening. Like I don't even know what to say. Like it's crazy.
No, I know. And I keep going back to, it's like trying to think of the positive. These conversations are great. You know, even if this conversation reaches one person and touches one person and changes, you know, some sort of perception for one person, I feel like that's, you know, that's worth it. See, look, I got my celery juice right here.
That's awesome. Woohoo!
But you know, I wanted to, like, there's so much here. I don't even really know where to narrow the focus because I want to talk to you. Basically, you and I started talking. We were actually, it was funny, before the live actually started, we were trying to figure out where we, like, how we connected. But we started when I was starting to do fasting, and you are very seasoned with fast. You just did a 7-day while working 65 hours a week. I think you're like, I just wanted to see if I could do a 7-day long fast working 65 hours a week. So if you don't mind, start talking about your journey kind of with fasting and just how that's been for you, the different type of fast you've done. You told me that you do like specific fasts, like you'll do like a grape juice fast, and like I'm really curious to hear
Yeah.
about the benefits of different fasts with different juices for different organ systems. So I would love
Yeah.
to hear that.
For sure. So I'm like still in the early stages of learning. I started fasting last spring. I have a really good friend who's pretty out there. He's the one who kind of like planted the seed for me to go vegan. And then he did a lot of fasting. And then one time he did a 30-day water fast. And this was, I think, like a year and a half ago. And I was in shock and awe. I went to college with plans of going to medical school. And so I like I believed I had a very good background in like nutrition and science, and that like I knew it all right. Like it doesn't make sense. You shouldn't not eat food for 30 days or even a day. And I was an athlete in college who was like, you know, eat. And so it just didn't make sense. And so one time I was just like, why the hell not? Like he did it for 30 days. Let me try it for 5. So the first time I did it for 5 days. And it was really transformative. And I don't even know, like it was just, I was speechless like I am now. Like I just had no idea. And I realized that I'm not giving my body enough credit and that our bodies are so strong. So then I started doing research and I saw like the longest recorded water fast is like 300, medically recorded is like 368 days or something. That's how long they would support it. And I think then they stopped supporting it after that. But I mean, just the fact that we can do this, I was like, wow, that's really interesting. So I started to think about it in terms of, look, I've been eating for 24 years of my life. What would it be like if I didn't eat for 5 days? And it was just a matter of being curious. And that's kind of where the fasting journey has led me is, look, I've never done this before. Why don't I try this and see how it feels? And if my body feels like shit, then I stop. But if I can push a little further, I'll push a little further and continue to see if that helps. So that's kind of been my thoughts around it, I guess. It's been a really amazing experience.
Yeah, I want to do more fasting, but I have that my mind has this very strong hold on my body right now of talk about it a lot, but hypochondria, like I'm so hyper focused on every single thing that is happening in my body right now. It's insane. I was talking to David about this on my last episode about how I feel like I just became conscious to my body functions within the last year or so, and I just feel like I'm like almost like learning, but like in that scared period of learning of like, oh, like this is digestion, like this is like the feeling like right before I need to poop, like all this stuff that I'm like honing in on. And
Yeah.
it's scary because it's like kind of an unknown thing when you like wake up to these sensations, and I'm so hyper focused on them that like when I fast, I'm even more focused on my body because it's still that mental shock of like, holy shit, I'm not eating. And then I feel like my mind creates these symptoms and I think I'm feeling like shit, but I don't really think I'm feeling like shit. I think my mind's just doing it to me. And I can never, like the whole listen to your body thing, man, I am so on that page because I feel like that's where the magic is at in learning about yourself. But like, I still don't really know how to listen to my body because I feel like the mind takes over.
Yeah, it like objectifies it a little bit. Like it's like almost like the ego comes in and says like, you're not supposed to feel that way. Or even you're like your thoughts. For me, it's like my thoughts are running. And then like, I'm not supposed to feel that way, or I should eat, or I should do this, or I should do that. And then it's like, fuck that. Just wait, just hang on for a second. Like, let's just try this. That's how I guess like I went towards it. I've been doing like a lot of work and a lot of therapy. And for some reason, I just have had, like I said earlier, like my mantra this year has been like, go to what's freaking you out. Go to it, go to it, go to it. And I feel like that's kind of how you felt as well, right? Like you totally face a major fear when you fasted. And I think like in general, just being in that practice for me has been so helpful. Like being in the practice of feeling fearful and moving forward. And for some reason, fasting has been like a really good avenue for that. And it might not be for some people. And I really, really, really like want to preface it by saying like, if you have an eating disorder, if you feel like very uncomfortable, or if it doesn't speak to you, don't do it. Like do what speaks to you. That's, I guess, like my main point of today is just like, do what speaks to you. because we just do things.
I think that I totally agree. I think the whole fasting thing really it reinforces the concept of adversity and doing things that make us feel uncomfortable, because when you can stretch past that point of discomfort, then you realize what you're actually capable of. And if you keep stretching that point, you realize how much more you're capable of. So it's like now, for example, before I did my first fast, I wouldn't eat all day, and then I would eat and I would freak out like, oh my gosh, I haven't eaten all day, like my body needs more. Like I had that thought that came. But now if I don't eat all day because I'm not hungry, I'm like, oh, I'm not hungry, because
Yeah.
I know I haven't eaten for 3 days. But see, here's the thing. It's like, so you listen to your body, right? How do you know if you feel bad without a thought? Like I try to get into that thoughtless state of like, okay, I don't want to become overruled with my thoughts here. I don't want the ego to take over. I don't want to sit here and tell myself like, I'm feeling good, I'm feeling bad. Is this right? Is this wrong? Like whatever. But then, sometimes you do feel like shit, and sometimes you need to know when to pull the plug on what you're doing, right? But then what thought do you listen to? And this is probably a great like kind of transition into like truth, the concept of
Yeah.
truth. How do you listen to that?
Yeah. So, I still struggle with that. I think, I don't know, I really envy people who like don't have food issues. I kind of feel like we all do, but I really envy people who I believe to not have food issues. But lately, what I've been trying to do is when I have like thoughts and I'm questioning them, it's more of just like become an experiment rather than a thing that like, oh, I feel like shit. Because a lot of times what I do is I eat when I feel like shit and just eat. And then after that, it kind of like goes into this feedback loop of like, I feel like shit, I eat shit, I feel like a shitty person. Then I eat shit, and then I feel like a shitty person. And it's like this wave that you can't get out of. And when you really sit in it and are totally aware throughout the entire process and just trying and being your best and saying, you know what, I feel like shit, I'm going to eat like shit, and no judgment. I'm going to, go through this process and see what comes out on the other end. And using that as information rather than another tool to like judge yourself or harm yourself or hurt yourself, I think is a really wonderful opportunity. But it's the same for like when you are eating, when you're happy, like, oh, I'm super happy. Like, let's go have a big dinner and celebrate. And then you like overeat and then you feel like shit. And I just think really it's examining the link between emotions and food and where that is, and being aware, and even maybe like journaling or doing something where you're really looking at the correlation between the two. Because there's like, for me in my life personally, like I'm only speaking from personal experience and observations, but it's shown me that for me, I would say prior to fasting, 70% of the time that I sat down to eat was emotion related. And the other 30%, the other 30% was like just eating normally. And that's an unhealthy relationship with food.
Yeah, because it's even right now, real time. It's morning. I've drank a good amount of water. I'm drinking my celery juice, but like my stomach feels a little weird. And when I say a little weird, is just it feels a little like I feel a little twinge in it. Like it doesn't feel normal. Like I feel little slightly discomfort, but sometimes it happens with celery juice. Like it's just potent juice going into your stomach, right? But it's like right now I'm sitting here and I'm anxious about that because I'm sitting here live talking to somebody and I'm like, oh my gosh, what if I have to go diarrhea? What if I have to run away? Like all these what ifs, right? That are like building up in my mind. So what if I pass out? All these crazy things that are really unlikely, like greatly unlikely for how much I really take care of myself from a physiological perspective. But then it's like right now I just want to like grab this banana and eat it so I can mentally feel better in my head that I just ate some food and that I'm nourished. And so I can almost like check a box off and feel like I'm like doing something right to care for myself. Does my body actually need this banana right now? I really don't think so, because I had a great dinner last night. I'm hydrated, but it's this mental fuckery that I am going through right now in this moment with myself, real time. So congratulations for everybody watching. You can totally see my fucking mental fuckery right now live. But yeah, and emotions are trying to get me to eat this banana. And what is interesting is that as I'm speaking this out of my body right now, my stomach is starting to feel better. because I feel like I'm just speaking the truth of what's happening, what's going on, naming it, calling it out, and saying, there it is. I'm accepting it.
Yes. And there's two things with that. The first is like the believed to be true and what's actually true. Have you ever heard of Byron Katie?
No.
Okay, if you ever, it's really she's kind of out there, but she's brilliant. Her name's Byron Katie. She's this really wonderful woman that does this beautiful work. And she talks about the difference between what we believe to be true and what is actually true. And the distinction between that is the end of suffering. And when you identify an emotion, for me, the three emotions for myself are fear. So fear is a emotion that's associated with the future. And the future's not here. It doesn't exist, right? Like for me, that's how I view it, is like the future doesn't exist. Like right here exists. So fear is an irrational fear of the future, an irrational thought, something I'm believing to be true. And then guilt and shame. Guilt and shame are like huge in my life. And that's past. Like that's things that are happening that I'm assuming are going to happen again. But it's still an irrational thought. And I have that a lot with food, is like, if I eat this, then I'm going to like, or I used to, I mean, it's a daily battle, you know, like we can say that we're over our food issues, but we really all have some that we still are working on. And it's such a gift to be able to work on them. But when I'm eating, sometimes I'll be concerned about, oh my gosh, how is this going to respond to my stomach? How am I going to, you know, how am I going to feel? How am I going to, yeah, like exactly. I feel you on that. But then it's like, wait, I'm here now. For all I know, like if we're really going to get out there, for all I know, I've never even eaten a banana before. There's no proof of the past. There's no proof of the future. All I have is right now, and this like thing in front of me, I don't even know if it's banana. So I'm going to eat it and feel it in my body and like have the most mindful experience I can have, and then move forward with that information in whatever way I want to. I don't know. It's just like a really interesting concept.
I like want to cry. Like seriously, when you just explain that struggle, because that is a struggle that I deal with, I feel like every single day. Like I can't even tell you, like when I'm eating anything, like even anything I've deemed as like safe foods. And when I say safe, it's I eat them constantly. Like I know that I don't react to them.
Yeah.
When I'm eating them, like the process of eating is so anxiety inducing for me, because I'm literally sitting there thinking about the food going into my stomach, and am I going to have a reaction to it? Am I going to feel sick? Am I going to feel nauseous? Am I going to have to like, you know, go to the bathroom? Am I going to reject it? Like I don't know if that maybe stems from like all the times before with the standard American diet when I would eat fast food and ice cream and stuff, and I would I would actually feel like shit, but I'd suppress it because I would like just be in like zombie mode or whatever. I feel like just eating. But it's a real struggle sitting there and just hyper fixated on that. But then, like you said, sometimes what I'll do is I will sit there and be like, this is a new experience. This is brand new. This is the only experience I'm ever going to have eating this banana in front of me, right? This is a unique banana.
Yeah.
This is the only banana just like this that exists.
Yeah. And that's true.
Yeah. No, it's I was listening to a conversation on truth between Brett Weinstein and Jordan Peterson, and Brett Weinstein talks about a really interesting concept called he calls it false literal truths versus metaphorical truths. And he talks about like the metaphorical truth, like for example, like a false literal truth also being a metaphorical truth. Let me see if I can get this right. So like this, everything happens for a reason. He used that example. Everything happens for a reason. Is that a literal truth? No, you can't really prove that, right? So that's a false literal truth. Like it's not literal, but it's also metaphorical truth in the sense that if you were to tell yourself that and believe that, arguably you could live a better, I don't like that word better, but for lack of a better word, a better life, because let's just say someone embarks or a tragedy happens to somebody, right? If someone believes everything happens for a reason, they may be more optimistic in looking for the bright light or the silver lining out of that tragedy, as opposed to someone who doesn't believe everything happens for a reason and they just kind of wallow in their misery. So it's like we have these truths also on the flip side that we can believe that aren't literal truths, but they're metaphorical truths, and that if we believe them, we technically have a better life. So it's like, I mean, this is a literal truth sitting here saying that this is a new banana, but there's also, I feel like you can apply that metaphorical truth to other scenarios that would also help you remain more optimistic in the face of suffering.
Yes, to everything. I mean, really, honestly, or just like almost taking like an I don't know mindset. Like, job. Well, I've lost my job before, maybe, or maybe not. And if I've lost my job before, I'm associating it to the job that I've lost before and thinking about how hard that experience was and how shitty that experience was, and then associating it to this. But if I go from like an I don't know space of I don't know, like I've never been fired from this job at this time in my life at this particular point where I've done all this work, like we don't give ourselves enough credit. Like sometimes we function with like, for me, what was really interesting was I was like functioning from a person I used to be and not giving the person I am now enough credit. And that was a believed to be scenario where I'm believing to be myself as somebody in a different realm, in a different space, and applying that to my present self and showing up as a maybe like 18-year-old in a 24-year-old's body and not giving that 24-year-old enough credit. And like, that's such a great point, is if you come with a mindset of, I don't know, or maybe everything happens for a reason, the outcome and the result is so different. It's so powerful. Like, our minds are so powerful. It's crazy.
It's just being curious, and the patterns are what really, I feel like sometimes are crippling, because like you were saying, we make so many patterns, we make so many associations with like, because, you know, I felt this way in this scenario before, in this scenario, I'm going to feel the exact same way. And you go in, you bring that almost intention into that new scenario, and you manifest it just by thinking about it. Like, I can't even tell you how many times, I swear I did this. It's not, I don't have proof. I can't speak on it like from a factual standpoint, but my mother and father-in-law came over and they made us lunch. And you know, about 5 or 6 hours after they left, my husband starts throwing up. And I don't know if it was the food. At that particular day, I only had the cabbage and the rice that they made, but he had the cabbage, the rice, and some meat. I think I had like a bite of meat. But anyway, I was looking at him. He got sick. Like, I think he had some sort of food poisoning. Like, he threw up 3 times in an hour. So it was like his body was trying to expel something. But I was looking at him and like, I was like, I'm next. Like, I'm sick. Like, it must be like, what if it was the cabbage? And I swear my stomach started feeling crappy. I swear I manifested something, because I have dealt with IBS before. So like, when my emotions get all out of whack, like my bowels freak out. So for the next day and a half, I didn't throw up, but I had terrible diarrhea to the point where I started having diarrhea. And then I started thinking, okay, so this is my version of this food poisoning. And like, next day I had diarrhea, and I swear I feel like I manifested it, because now as I'm going down my journey of self-awareness, I'm starting to realize when something in my body is physical and when something is mental turning into physical. Like, there's 2 distinguishing feelings in my body, and that one almost felt more mental than physical. And that's why I say I feel like I manifested that shit.
No, I feel you on that. When I was in college, this is like key number 1, that I was not following my purpose. I wasn't doing like purpose aligned work. And in college, every year, without a doubt, every fall, without a doubt, I would make myself physically so stressed that I would end up in the hospital with pneumonia, or like I think it was my senior year, it was pneumonia. The year before that, it was something else, a very severe case of strep. And it became clear to me that when we don't listen to our bodies and we let our thoughts control our mind, our bodies, and there's like, it's almost like there's not a connection. Like, it's like, I'm up here and you're down here and I'm not going to listen to you, when it's like so synergistic, like we need to, where it's a collective. And it wasn't until I started doing things and making decisions and listening to my body. I haven't been sick since my senior year of college. That was like 3 years ago. Like, it's crazy. 2 years ago. So it's crazy. Like, I'm a firm believer in that. So I hear you on that. Like, that is a true thing.
Yeah, it's crippling because when I see the capabilities or my potential kind of coming on, when I see like, okay, I could go two ways right now. When I see the path, sometimes I try so hard to not go down the shitty path that I kind of end up going down the shitty path because you're so fixated on it. It's like a concept that we were talking about in my last podcast. I don't know if you had a chance to listen to it yet, but the one on addiction. I remember you were talking about it.
Yeah.
David was talking about how, for him, he was an addict. He was a binge drinker. And for him, he checked himself into an outpatient rehab facility. And, for some reason for him, he just never really bought into a lot of the suggestions that they had for him. Like, you need to drop all of your friendships. You need to do all this stuff because he didn't feel like they were really getting down to the root cause of addiction. And one of the things he said, his counselor told him that he should be going to AA 4 to 5 times a week. And he's like, what the fuck, really? He's like, I'm trying not to think about alcohol. So why should I go talk about not thinking about alcohol for 5 hours a week?
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not supposed to help me.
Yeah.
And it's so true. It's like, we don't want to be something or we don't want to do something, but then we spend like all of our time like, okay, I'm going to like think about not doing this. I'm going to think about not being this person. I'm going to think about, and you actually manifest that by trying to not do it.
Yes. I was just having this conversation with one of my friends the other day, and he was saying when you want something, the opposite will appear. So, right, like if I want to eat better, then all of a sudden the only thing that I see is just like fast food or, whatever is my downfall. You know what I mean? Or like whenever I want to work out, like, or be more healthy or incorporate like a more active lifestyle in my life, all I can see is the Netflix or whatever, whatever it is for people. But it's so true. Like, it's almost like temptation and then having I don't know if it's like in it, because it really comes down to like, I don't know. And it's not even a bad thing. Like if you dive into the Netflix, just like dive into the Netflix and see how you feel. And like, it's so funny. Oftentimes
guilt. It's not carrying guilt with your actions.
Yes.
It's just doing things. Like if you feel a craving, it's almost like I feel like sometimes we have these like really weird guilty cravings or guilty pleasures. Like sometimes it's like, on a Sunday, all I want to do is like sit down and watch a mindless show like all day. And then I'll bring guilt with it of like, you should be improving your podcast. You should be learning. You should be reading. You should be like doing all these things. But it's like, why don't I just fucking sit down and watch TV? And then maybe my body just wants to do it for a couple of hours as a mental escape. And then I'll find productivity in the last part of the day. But see, I don't even give myself a chance to sink into the experience and really just be mindful with it and be present and see what needs to come up organically out of that experience.
Oh, that's brilliant. And for me, what happens is like I have this rebellious inner child that like the moment I start like parenting that rebellious inner child, like, no, you can't just like veg out. The rebellious like inner child in me wants to just like stay longer. And then my entire day is gone. And I'm like, what the fuck? Like if I could have just given myself an hour and like totally said, I love you and I'm doing this because I love you, self. And I want you to relax. I wonder what the difference. So that's what I'm experimenting with now. I think that's so funny that you bring that up because like I think that's something everybody can relate to.
Yeah, but the hardest challenge with it is like you have to believe I love you. See, that's my disconnect right now. Like you can't, we were talking about affirmations recently in my last episode. We were talking about like how silly affirmations are when you feel like a piece of shit and you're just like, I'm worthy, I'm powerful, I am great. But you're like, no, I'm fucking not. Like there's that dialogue inside, right?
Yeah.
So I feel like the work in it is if you're going to tell yourself, I love you, I'm doing this because I love you, you have to actually feel that love inside yourself for yourself. And I'll speak on myself, but I feel like a lot of us are like this. We don't have that love right now. We don't know what that feels like. So then when we tell ourselves it's because I love you, it doesn't it doesn't work.
No, you know, it's so funny because I was thinking about this today. So about a year ago, I had like this totally, like, if you look at my year, like what's happened to me in the last year, it's gone like complete 180.
I have it on here to talk about. You said a personal overcoming story within the last year. So it's like, this is a perfect, like,
it's perfect. So it's funny because like about a year ago today, I was laying in the basement of my parents' house, college graduate, had plans of going to medical school, but first had wanted to apply for the Peace Corps. And I applied for the Peace Corps, and I like thought it was a shoo-in. Like I feel like my resume was great, like everything was perfect. A year ago, didn't get in. And it was like, I laid in my parents' bed, or I'm in my parents' basement for like 4 days. I didn't like do anything. I didn't eat. I felt like shit. I was like, I'm a piece of shit. Like, what am I supposed to do now? Like, who am I supposed to tell? Because I mean, it was like everybody that I talked to was like, oh my God, you're gonna get it. Like, I had 2,000 hours of volunteer experience in college, like all these things, had done research, was a good student, was a college athlete, like totally thought it was a shoo-in. And like the Peace Corps, I thought wasn't very competitive. So I was like, totally cool. So when I found out that I didn't get in, it was like the person my identity was like, my identity was ripped away from me, and I didn't know who I was.
Because were you doing everything up to that point to get into the Peace Corps?
Yes.
Like your college activities, like your life was about getting into the
Yes. That was my plan. Like if you were to ask anybody in my life, it was like rehearsed. Like, I'm going to the Peace Corps. When I come back, I'm taking my MCAT. And then when I come back, I'm going to medical school. Like that was my sequence. That was like, literally, I was telling everybody that because I at the time, like was fighting something inside me that was like, you don't want to go to medical school. You don't want to be a doctor, but I was still fighting it. So like the Peace Corps was kind of like my bridge between, where I was like, hopefully I'll figure it out in that 2 years. And then once I figured out that I didn't have those 2 years, and it's like, oh my God, what am I supposed to do? I'm like, fuck. So I sat in this room for like 4 days and was like, okay, I'm a piece of shit. Like, so what? I'm a piece of shit. And like really sat and like thought about it. It was like such a dark time, but now I look back and it's like the best thing that I've ever had like happen to me in my life. And I'm sitting in my bed thinking like, I'm a piece of shit. Okay, what if? Like, what if everybody thinks I'm a piece of shit? So what? What if I think I'm a piece of shit? So what? Like, who the fuck cares? Really, who cares? And I know that's like hard for some people to relate to. Really, honestly, if you sit down and think about it, what if everybody in the world didn't give a fuck about you? Would you live your life any different? And for me, that answer was yes. And then from there, it blossomed into finding out who I was. I ended up applying for the Peace Corps again, and I got accepted the second time just because I was like annoyed that I didn't make it. And then I like, and then I was like, I'm gonna study for this MCAT, so I'm gonna do it. So I got like 300 hours into study for this MCAT, and then decided, you know what, I don't want to be a doctor. Like, I don't want to go to medical school. And then I was like, shit, now what? Because I was working at a cabaret, was living in my parents' basement, and was like, what am I supposed to do now? Like, I don't know what I'm supposed to do.
So you didn't, so you got into the Peace Corps, but you didn't go.
Yeah. It was like at that time, it was like I had finally figured out that I was trying to run away from everything. The Peace Corps was like an opportunity to run away and like not have to deal with something for 2 years. And like that seemed like I was doing things for the wrong reason. And I like eventually would love to go into the Peace Corps, but I was just running. I was like so scared of like facing my shit here that I thought if I ran away, like it would all go away. And that wasn't the solution.
And when you say facing your shit, was that like just like becoming an adult, like figuring life out, like your purpose? Like, what do you mean by like what were you scared to face?
I think it was like, first of all, it was judgment it was almost like accepting failure, accepting that like I wasn't going to do what I said. And I identified that as like a major failure. Like, I have been telling people for years I was going to be a doctor, and I'd been telling people for years this is my plan, and it's not my plan anymore. Like, it doesn't speak to me, and that is a huge failure. And like, how do I deal with people's judgments? How do I deal with people's perceptions? And that was like so earth-shattering and scary to me, because the fact of it all was that I did not love myself enough to say, like, you're doing this for yourself. You're doing something that's good for you. You're making a life decision that like is really important, and you're doing it early. Like, how shitty would it be to get like 2 years into medical school and $100,000 in debt and then be like, I don't want to do this. And it really was like a gift, but at the time it didn't seem like it. And so it was just running away from family's judgment, of friends' judgment, of just like what I perceived to be the world's judgment. And yeah, it was crazy, but it's so good.
Fear of judgment is so crippling. I deal with it constantly, especially with this podcast of like,
Yeah.
what's somebody going to say? Like, what is my family going to say? Like my immediate family is very supportive, but sometimes I worry about my external or my, extended family, not external. And it's so crippling. Like what you said is so powerful. Like if it's sunk into you like that, nobody really gives a shit. Like, nobody really gives a shit about anybody else. Like, of course you have your group of people that you love. Like I'm not thinking about that when I say that statement, right? But the vast majority of people don't give a shit about you. And would you live your life differently if that really sunk in? And that is totally true. Like for me, sometimes I'm like, when I am by myself and just like running around laughing and saying stupid shit, like that's me and that's who I want to bring to the table. But as soon as the camera goes on, sometimes as soon as people can judge me, it's like, shit, like I do things differently.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's like, and once you get a taste of the freedom, it's really hard to like feel judged. Like it feels almost worse to be sitting here feeling judged when you've had a feeling of what it's like to have no judgment. And I think it's really interesting too, because I started to feel like if people are judging me or if I'm triggering somebody, maybe that's a good thing, because then maybe that's some work that they have to do so that, or it's like a reflection. It's a reflection of what am I triggering? Because what I noticed was that when I was triggered by people, for example, like I was triggered by people who were calling, people who were upset with me sharing my views about why I'm eating the way I'm eating. Even when they ask me, like they would ask me, like, why do you choose to eat the way you eat? And I tell them, and then they like start to personally attack me. And it's like, if I objectify or if I attach to any of those thoughts, that means I'm like internalizing them and thinking that I am that. And I don't have to think that I am that. I can think whatever I want to think about myself. And so hopefully in me triggering other people or triggering or saying something that's harmful to somebody or saying like, yeah, you know what, I tried mushrooms and it was great. And if that pisses somebody off, I hope that they look at why it pisses them off. And then like learning from it, because ideally, like, I don't want to be bothered by anybody. That's like my goal, is I just want to like love people, and love is a boundless thing that shouldn't be controlled by judgment or thought, or, you know what I mean? Like, it's just.
Yeah. And also in the situation that you described, it's understanding where people are coming from too. It sounds like with the situation you described, if people are asking you about your food choices and then you are opening up to them and then they are choosing to attack you, it sounds like they are looking to do that. So it sounds like they are out to attack someone or something, and that is totally on them, right? Like, so it's almost like they could ask you like, why do you like the color orange? And you could give an example and they'd be like, fuck orange. Like, why are you like, why do you like orange? It could be anything, right? Like these people that look to fight or look to argue for stupid shit that has nothing to do with them. It's like, that's what I've always wondered, the concept of food. Why do you care about what I eat? Like, I mean, people should to some degree, because when you talk about sustainability, that's why I love that you brought up sustainability, because it's something we can all benefit from. But when people don't bring any reasoning and they're just like so angry of like, why do you do this? Why do you do that? It's like, why do you really care that much? And like you said, I really hope these people could dive inside, but the sad reality is I don't think a lot of people do go inside for answers. And that's what Jordan Peterson, I love his work. That's what he talks a lot about, is embracing your truth, your individual truth. Because I feel like if so many people, this is a concept I wanted to talk about, It's actually really interesting because I heard him talk about this when I was watching one of his talks, and I relate it to the concept of have you ever heard of wild painted dogs?
No.
Okay, so there are these dogs in Africa, and they're these little freaking little ruthless little things. I mean, they're dogs and they look painted. They have all these different colors, but they hunt in packs. And they'll basically like it's pretty gruesome. Like it's just like found them on the National Geographic. So they'll like stalk a prey. They will surround them. They'll follow them. They like circle them, and they sometimes like start eating them alive. That's just what they know, right? They're survivalists.
Right.
That's what
Yeah.
they do. And I was talking to my husband the other day, and I was like, imagining, I'm like, what if these painted dogs became domesticated and became conscious? Like I pictured these little dogs, like, walking around with suits in little communities and stuff like we do, because we, Homo sapiens, we're animals and we became domesticated and conscious. So we have these animalistic tendencies inside of us. You can go to deep parts of us, like, for example, the fight or flight system. If somebody's attacking your man or attacking your child or whatever, that animalistic part of you is going to come out to defend yourself or other people, right? So we have these deep, dark parts of ourselves. And I feel like truth is going into ourselves in many hypothetical situations, learning about all of these different parts of ourselves that do actually exist. Like Jordan Peterson talks about truth in the sense of he did this experiment with himself where he dove inside and put himself in the scenario of being a Nazi soldier back in the Holocaust. He put himself in that mindset, really dove inside, tried to find the parts of him that would not only be able to do that task, but also enjoy it. Like he found those parts inside of himself. And then he says, truth is knowing that those parts of yourself exist, but consciously making choices to where if the opportunity came about for you to take on a role like that, how do you live your life to choose that, to basically always ensure that you would choose to not partake in those actions? And those answers are really deep inside of yourself. But I feel like that goes into the truth of like diving within and seeing all the icky, shitty, nasty parts of yourself at the depths, but then making choices to not go there if you have the option to go there.
Yeah, and almost questioning it. Like, I used to be the kind of person that if somebody would like cut me off, I'd be like, fuck you, and while driving and be like, fuck you, and have like intense road rage. And then one day I was having a really shitty day, like the worst day ever, and I was just driving like just was super not in a good space and was just not really fully aware of like driving. And I accidentally cut somebody off. And they did the same to other people. I started to really think about like, dang, how many people have I done that to that have been having like a really, really shitty day that like totally didn't deserve that. And
so you put yourself on the other end of the
yeah. Yeah. And it's like almost questioning and wondering like why they're coming from that space of like, and asking them and not just like assuming. Like I've had people who have asked me about like food choices and then gotten really defensive, and later I find out that like they had an eating disorder and it was really triggering for them to talk about it. And then once we started to go down that path, it was like really upsetting. And the thing that they did, the way that they like displayed their anger was just being upset at me for bringing it up. And it's like, I totally feel that. I totally get it. And it's just like developing a greater understanding because we all have like these ideas and these feelings that are so valid. And we're just like, there's such a disconnect right now. We're not listening to one another. And when we're able to listen is when we like really figure out what is really true. But to go back to your point about like finding it and feeling it in our body, like, oh, it's so true. Where you just like,
I feel like there's so many issues with people not believing that they could do something. Jordan Peterson also talks about this, and that like, for example, like when there's, there are some people out there that are like, you know, they don't believe that they're violent. They don't believe, or they don't believe that they have the capability for violence or capability of hitting someone or the capability of doing all of these things, like these things that would be deemed bad in their mind. So then what happens in a hypothetical scenario is like, you know, person A that believes this is walking down the street and all of a sudden an attacker comes up and tries to steal that person's child. Well, that person is going to operate from a place that they've never experienced before inside of themselves, right? They're going to either fight or they're going to freeze. They're going to do whatever their body is going to do in that state. Let's just say this person all of a sudden attacks this attacker and gets their child back. Well, in that process, you can almost traumatize yourself if you're holding on to beliefs in your head that you are not capable of attacking someone, for example, and all of a sudden you just did. And it's like you actually can get PTSD from that scenario because of the beliefs that you held about yourself that weren't true, which is crazy.
Yes. Oh, that's so crazy. Yeah. Wow. This stuff is just like, yeah, it'll really flip you on your head and make you think. It's just,
I've been getting into that philosophy, freaking psychology stuff. My husband loves it. And so I've really been trying to dive in because I'm trying to do lots of like personal work myself, you know, on like figuring out my demons and like going within and just figuring out my limitations and like what's holding me back. Like you said, there's so much shit. There's so much we don't know.
yes. And to function, sometimes we function from a place of like, I know. And that's so kind of dangerous.
Oh yeah, it's the freaking ego. That's exactly what I'm talking about with the situation that I just used. The example is just one, but that's going into life with I know. Like I know I couldn't do this. I know I'd never be able to do this. Like my husband does a lot of work around because he has a past with like law enforcement and stuff. It's just like PTSD and lots of stuff, but he constantly reminds himself that he could kill someone because he wants to remind himself of that in case the time were to come if he had to defend me or his family, like as the man of a household, you know, we want to have kids soon and stuff. He constantly puts himself in a scenario that he knows that he could if it came down to it, because if it came down to it to protect his family, he wants to be able to do that. And he wants to have ran through the scenario in his mind, because when people don't run through that potential scenario, because it's a very real scenario, especially with all the fucking freaks, you know, like, I mean, I hate to like talk about people that way, but there are just some people that are not really people anymore because of, you know, a lot of the stuff that they've been through or whatever. But running through that scenario makes it more real so that if it ever is real, then you can deal with it because you've already ran through it in your mind. And I don't think it always has to be for something as extreme as like killing somebody, but it's like panic attacks, eating, like what we were talking about, just being there in that moment because you've ran through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Or just saying like simply, I don't know. And just like going with whatever happens.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So interesting.
I want to hear about, it's very off topic, but I really want to hear about it. So I'm totally going to switch gears here. I want to hear about your process of eating, because you said it's very fun and exciting. And I also, I remember you told me once that you learned that you didn't know you were actually eating until you had food in your mouth. Like you didn't know, your mind didn't know that you were actually eating.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that in your process.
So I kind of touched on it a little bit earlier, but when I fasted that first time, I multiple times throughout that fast, like I keep things like out, like healthy snacks out, just wherever, just so that if I'm like moving and shaking, like I can just grab something healthy, because more times than not, if I don't do that, then I make a not so healthy choice later in the day. So during the fast, I kept those things out and around me just to kind of like test myself and do a little experiment. And every single day I would go to this like little box of almonds that I had and like grab an almond and like put it in my mouth. And then it wasn't until the almond was like sitting on my tongue that I'd be like, oh shit, I'm eating, and like spit it out. And it was just like how mindless eating had been, how it's almost like how unaware, I mean, fasting for me showed me that I was not yet fully aware of like my eating and the whole process. But in my entire life, like there were just things like I'm driving and I'm not like fully present of the beauty of the world that's around me while I'm driving. And that sounds kind of crazy, but like sometimes we're just like so caught up in what's next. And we get kind of thrown into that mindset of like, what's next, what's next, what's next, that we like totally stop and forget about right now. But my process of eating is like what we talked about earlier with the banana. I think it's kind of fun with trying to take a perspective. Right now, I'm trying to take a perspective of the only thing that is real is right now, and what happened yesterday was not real, and what happened before was not real. And so when I think about like a pizza, the thought, I don't know if you've ever had it all the time, where like I really want a pizza or I really want something. So then I go get like a pizza. And the thought of the pizza is almost, not even almost, it's way better. The thought of the pizza is way better than actually eating the pizza. Have you had that experience?
Absolutely. It's the anticipation behind things. I have found, I don't want to interrupt your story, but I've found that I actually like get off on the anticipation of eating something versus actually eating it. So it's like I even had experiences where like all day I'll be craving something and I'll like go out to buy the ingredients and I'll make it. And even through making it, I'm like excited. And when it comes to the moment of eating it, I'm no longer excited for it.
Yes, it's like the same thing, or like when you're shopping or whatever, you know, you're at the store and like the thought of shopping is so great, and then you like buy something at the grocery store or whatever, buy a piece of clothing, and then you get it and you're like, oh crap, okay, what now? Like what are you supposed to do with this? And so what I realized was that anticipation of the food was like totally ruining the whole experience, and that I was my boyfriend, my partner Chase, is like so brilliant and patient, because like when we used to go out to eat, I would like sit at the restaurant and I would order the food and I would just think about the food. Like I couldn't even have a conversation with him. And one of the ways that I would like try to chill out to have a conversation with him was I used to wear this watch, and I would put a timer on the watch, because I knew like my concept of time between ordering the food and the food getting there was so irrational that it would seem like 2 hours, but it was really 15 minutes. So I would start the timer at my watch, and whenever I would get stressed, I would look at the timer and be like, oh, it's only been like 3 minutes, like chill out. And I realized that the whole process of eating and anticipation was like totally fucking up just the beauty and the opportunity to nourish my body. And so I started to simply just say, I've never tried pizza before, or I've never tried this before. And looking at it as every single thing that I've eaten, I've never tried it before. I've never had this experience. I don't know how it's going to make me feel, but making it the most mindful experience and saying like, I've never been to this restaurant with Chase and ordered this thing on this day. It's just like being present, and we don't do it. I don't want to say we, but I don't do it enough. I'm always like, when is this coming? What's next? I have to do this later today. I have to do that. Like I have to pay it after. And it's like, just be here now in this moment. And it's the same thing. Like you were talking about it earlier with the resting. Like, can I just rest for an hour? Like, can I just sit here and eat alone for an hour? And so my process has been, I've never eaten this before. And really, and that sounds crazy, but if you can really get into that mindset of I've never eaten before, like really, I've never eaten this food before, it completely changes the way that you eat. And I people that are probably listening are like, what the hell is this lady talking about? But like, hear me out and try it one time. But don't like half-ass try it, like actually try it and see if there's a difference. And if it doesn't speak to you, it doesn't speak to you. But that's what's been really working for me lately.
I'm totally going to try it. I'm excited. So what have you seen? Well, how long have you been doing this, first of all? And then have you seen differences in maybe your thoughts that you used to have when you were eating, or differences in your body symptoms that you were talking about? Like, have you seen a lot of difference when you've applied this mindset to your eating and this structure?
Yeah, that's a great question. I have noticed that when I am full, I stop eating. That's like a problem that I struggle with so much. It's that when I like eat, I just want to eat. And when I'm full, I stop eating. I notice like flavors that I haven't noticed before. I've noticed textures that I haven't noticed before. My conversations are deeper and richer. And then I feel more grateful for that hour of time spent in that process of eating and eating with somebody. It's become more of like a sacred experience. I almost want to say is it's eating used to be kind of like a just let's eat, like let's go, come on, let's go, I need to get on with my day. But it's become more of a sacred and beautiful experience for me. And I feel like I've through this and through fasting, I've started to reconstruct my relationship with food. And then when I get into a pattern again, because we all have these like crazy fucking patterns, when I get into a pattern again of eating with no mindfulness at all, I can recognize it and shift and pivot and say, I have a choice to continue to eat this way, or I have a choice to change my mindset. And that is like just giving yourself the choice and recognizing that you have the choice is like such a powerful gift.
Yeah, it is to be able to course correct midway through realizing that you're mindless. Like for me, I realized that I eat very fast when my thoughts start going really quickly. I just like sometimes I'll even start out meals eating mindfully, and I'll start out like, okay, like I'm going to taste this, like I'm going to go slow, I'm going to feel the bite in my mouth, I'm going to feel it go down my stomach, but then it doesn't last because fucking patterns. And then all of a sudden, like my mind will not right away, but my mind will go elsewhere, and then it starts thinking quickly, and it's like it's almost like my bites coincide with how fast my mind is like shooting thoughts. Like if it's like more stressful and more intense, it's like I'll start eating faster and faster and faster.
Yes.
And then I'm overeating because I'm not paying attention to my body. And I'm trying to also, I think the dopamine spikes kind of go in there too, because you're getting the pleasure from the taste of food. And so I'm finding myself faster and faster and faster and faster. And then sometimes in that process, it's beautiful when I can find myself doing that. Like, whoa, 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 Ashley, like calm the fuck down, slow down,
Yeah.
pay attention. But sometimes I can't. And then those are the times where it's like you stop eating, and then you're like, fuck, like my stomach hurts.
Yeah. 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 And that's just like so beautiful. It's crazy like how you go through life and it takes you so long. For me, it's like it took me fucking 24 years to realize that like this is the change that needs to be made. It's crazy.
You said you had an experience on mushrooms that really helped you listen to your body.
Yes.
I'm excited to hear about that one.
Yeah, yeah.
I love this stuff.
Yeah, so my experience with mushrooms was really interesting. My boyfriend is really an experimental individual, and he's the kind of guy that will like just go like he won't just do a little bit, like he'll do like the whole thing. He'll do like the entire experience, like he's like balls to the wall, and it's awesome. Like he's like not afraid, and I am somebody who's very fearful. Like was a goody two shoes, tried to like stay. I rarely drank even in college. Like my 21st birthday, I remember like I went drinking and it was like, this is not it. And then like was just so, because of my conditioning and my upbringing, was just like told to totally not even touch any sort of drug. And so Chase had brought it up to me to do it in August. We were going to the Boundary Waters, which is this beautiful area in northern Minnesota. It's just lakes and land for as far as you can go. There's no, like, you basically take a canoe, you canoe to your campsite, or you portage, which is where you pick up all your stuff in your canoe and you walk to a different lake and then put your canoe back in and keep canoeing until you find a campsite. So we decided we were going to do it there because it's like out in the middle of nowhere. It's off the grid, like just to appease my concerns, because I was like, I'm going to go to jail. I'm going to, all these stupid, irrational thoughts.
That's interesting that you have those thoughts. My thoughts are like, I'm going to die. I need a hospital.
Mine was like, so the problem is I was so naive to it. So then so what happened was I only did like a little bit because I was so like concerned.
Like what's a little bit?
Like maybe 2 little mushrooms.
So you're probably, 2 little mushrooms. So that's probably like maybe a gram. So you probably had like a mild experience, right?
Yes. Yeah. Okay. And then Chase, mind you, we had like a bag this big, just full, you know, like those little snack baggy Ziplocs.
Mm-hmm.
And it was full to the brim. Chase ate the rest, like thing. I don't know. I'm not good with grams or whatever, but he just did it. And all of a sudden, like I had never been with somebody who had been on a psychedelic trip. So I am sitting there and all of a sudden he looks at me and he says, "Who am I?" And like looked so afraid. And I'm like, oh shit. Like, what have I gotten myself into? I've like made my boyfriend like go crazy. How am I gonna, we had to get to where we were. We had canoed probably about 10 miles. So we're like in the middle of nowhere. And this is when that set in for me. Is like, what the fuck have I gotten myself into? Like, he's going crazy, like I'm screwed. And he was like literally tripping. And I had no experience. So I didn't know, like, was it a good trip? Was it a bad trip? And afterwards he ended up telling me like, it was amazing. It was the best thing that ever happened to him. But for me in that moment, it was terrifying. Like,
well, and you just took some too. So
yes.
You're really like, holy shit, I'm going to go insane.
Yes, exactly. And then I'm like, is this ever going to wear off? Because I didn't know how long they lasted. And his lasted like 8 hours. And it was like at points he would look at me and say, "You're Julia Albrecht. Are you Julia?" Like he had, like, you know, when you run into somebody at the store, and have you ever had somebody come up to you and be like, "Hey, are you Ashley from blah, blah, blah?" And that's like what the experience was he'd be like, "Hey, are you Julia?" Like he had no idea who I was. And I was like, oh my God, like when is this going to end? So I was turned off from that moment on. And then after we had a conversation about it, he said it was brilliant. He learned so much about himself. Like it was such a beautiful experience to do it in nature. So after that, I'm like, okay, let's do it one more time. So the next time he took a lesser dose and I took a higher dose. And I probably said,
do you know how much did you take? Like how much was it compared?
I would say it was probably 4 times the amount that I took.
So you probably, I'm going to say maybe like 2.5.
2.5 to 3. Yeah.
Okay.
And the other thing is I hadn't eaten. So I really wanted it to be like on an empty stomach. For some reason, I felt like it would be better. And I had never before felt so connected to my body and like felt so connected to, that's when, after that, I started doing like research on connections within our body. Like my stomach, I felt connected to my brain. I felt my kidneys connected to my skin. I felt all these things in my body, like, you know, anxiety that I hadn't dealt with. I started doing, as I was tripping, I started doing yoga and like started to do postures that like I had been told, like, I don't know if you know pigeon pose. It's where you lay with your opposite knee by your opposite hand and kind of in this like weird position to open up your hips. And I've been told that hips are you and a lot of emotion and a lot of sadness in your hips. And I sat there and I just like felt everything. And I had never felt that before. And it was just like, wow, like I am a whole, I don't even know how to explain it besides like I am a whole being. Like I am a entire, everything in me, like I feel. And also realizing that like my body is working so hard to support me and love me and make me move and make me breathe. And there's all these reactions going on my body. And how am I, my thoughts, my decisions, my choices, how am I honoring my body? And that my body is forever going to forgive me and going to keep going and keep trying and keep living. But I have to do things to be kinder to my body. And that was like such a beautiful, wonderful lesson, but also just like an opportunity to be so grateful for my body.
So did you have any dark parts of your trip, or was your trip mainly good?
Yeah, I had some dark parts. And it's funny because so right immediately when I started tripping, I was like very afraid. And I had done a lot of research too. Like I had done a lot of work. I had talked, my boyfriend and I, we go to couples therapy and I go to therapy on my own. And we had both, like, was so nervous that I had like brought it up and wanted to go through counseling. And both of my therapists are they're pretty great. And so they had told us, like, if you're going to do it, be in a good state, because if you're not in a good state of mind, it'll go bad. So then what happened to me was I was like, oh shit, I'm going to be in a bad state of mind when it happens and it's going to go bad. So I'm sitting there and it starts to go bad. And I'm like, okay, I'm just going to sit and meditate. So I sat and I meditated. And all of a sudden it was just like, I don't even know, but I just started to see like around the corner, like I had my eyes closed and it was almost like there were like things coming up, like the underworld almost like coming up trying to get to me. And I just said like, fuck it. This is me. All of this is me. And then all of a sudden it was like I went down this chute of rainbows and everything was perfect. And then I started tripping great. And I was just like, whoa,
So
that's
like
crazy.
your physical sensations like that you were like things that you were seeing actually changed for the positive when your mind shifted?
Yes. And I just it was accepting that it was me. Like the more that I said, oh no, the bad's coming, the bad's coming, the bad's coming, it kept coming closer. And then for some reason there was something in me that was just like, it's all me. It's all me. And it completely changed. And my trip for the rest of the night was great. And you know, a week later, the New York Times magazine, they did a whole spread on psychedelics and how psychedelics are being used in therapy. And one of the, I can't remember, there's like some big scientist. Do you know his name? He's like world known for being a mushroom,
Paul
LSD,
Stamets.
probably. One of his pieces of advice was to just flow down the stream.
Or maybe you're thinking Terrence McKenna. He's passed away, but he's like he was the huge like world renowned like everybody knows in the psychedelic community. Terrence McKenna, Paul Stamets were more mushrooms, like specific mushrooms. But so you were saying flow. What was it?
Just flow down the river. Like don't try to control it. Like almost like a lazy river. You sit in those and then you sit in the inner tube. Just float down the river, and that's something to come back to while you're in it. And
yeah, the bad parts are resistance.
I've really been
in life too, right? Like in psychedelics and in life, the shit that comes up is, I believe, is like all resistance to what is actually going on.
Yes, and a lot of it is like the ego death. Like we hear that a lot with people who do the psychedelics. Is like there's this ego death, and a lot of people fight that. And every story that I've heard is when people stop fighting the death of the ego or like the death of the self or death of whatever thoughts or judgments, is when it becomes a really revolutionary, brilliant experience for them. And yeah, that's kind of what my experience. That's what it was like for me. It was just so eye-opening. And I sat in meditation for about an hour and a half, and just like it was just a cool space to be in, of like I'm here now and just enjoying it, and everything kind of just falls away. And I've always been really interested to try it with like a therapist, like do therapist assisted psychedelic or LSD trip, because I've heard they're really cool.
Yeah, guided ones. I am interested in that too. I'm interested in next time I experiment, I want to do psilocybin mushrooms in nature for sure, because the time I did LSD was at my house and I didn't think it through. I kind of just did it because I wanted to jump. I was so scared of a psychedelic experience that it just kind of fell into my lap based on circumstance. And I was like, if I don't do this now, I'm going to be thinking about it forever and I'm never going to do it because I'm going to do more and more research about bad trips and I'm just going to psych myself out. So I literally just took a full dose. I took 100 micrograms kind of on a whim without really planning for it. Like I hadn't fasted. I didn't even eat that well that day. So I wasn't even really in a good mindset. So I didn't really, I had great parts of the trip, but then I had terrible parts of the trip where I was resisting, like so awful. So the next time I definitely want to go in fasted. I'm curious about psilocybin and I want to do it in nature. But I hear about the guides that exist where you can basically sit there with a blindfold and with music on, like earphones. And walk you through like it. I'm a little nervous for that because that's totally introspective. Like that's a full introspective experience. Like I don't know if I'm ready to like lay there in the dark with headphones on. It's like I feel like I could deal with like a decent dose and it still being in an environment where I feel like I have control of some degree. But like if I'm closing my eyes, fucking diving within here, oh man. Freaks me out a little bit.
It's a pretty creepy thought. And I found it super interesting to start to talk with people about my experience, because I thought it was like such a beautiful experience. I ended up like telling my mom, who I would have never ever been like, hey mom, I just tried mushrooms. Like who the hell calls their mom and is like, hey mom. But it was just like a beautiful experience. And I noticed that there's like such a stigma around it.
Yeah,
And when you really start to question things and think of like all the other harmful shit that we do every day, like we drink Coca-Cola or like, you know what I mean? Like Coca-Cola probably kills more people than psilocybin mushrooms, or McDonald's probably kills more people than psilocybin mushrooms.
I don't
But
even think there's been a reported death from like an isolated experience with
no,
psilocybin mushrooms. Now, if you take psilocybin mushrooms and you have some other shit going on in your life and then you jump off a bridge, like I personally don't believe that's the psilocybin mushrooms. I think
yeah,
you jumping off of a bridge. So, but
yeah,
I don't think that there's been any reported like overdoses or deaths or anything associated with psilocybin mushrooms. So it's like
no,
you're saying, it's like you have sugar that's killing way more people or causing all this chronic disease, and then you have this amazing plant. For me, I wanted to talk to you about this because I was actually, when I was looking at some of your bio information, a lot of issues that for me like that has caused this ripple like hypochondria that I then bring in as fear into my psychedelic trips, because I like fear my body and fear losing my body and losing all of that, started when I worked as a nursing assistant
oh,
in a
interesting.
hospital. And you said you worked as a hospice nursing assistant.
Yeah,
I had it on my list. I'm like, I am going to talk to her about this.
yeah.
Because I had basically in 2015, I had a fainting experience. I broke my toe, I fainted, but that's the first time I've ever lost consciousness. Like I straight up,
Wow.
I lost consciousness 3 times in a row. So I
Yeah.
jumped out of bed literally. Like I literally jumped out of bed that morning. I don't know why, but I had a bed with like it was like a lower bed. So like if you picture the edge of the bed here, I jumped off and my pinky toe broke. Like literally
Oh,
like outside of my toe. It was like or out of my foot.
oh my God.
And I remember I jumped out of bed and I was like to my husband, I was like, I think I broke my toe. He like shoots out of bed, comes over to me, and I was laying there or sitting there and I was like, I think I'm gonna faint. Like I had never fainted before. Actually, I'd fainted once giving blood, but like your body just feels disgusting. And I fainted, fell back, and then I'm like, at the time I worked at American Red Cross volunteering, so I know that they get like cold cloths. So I was like, get me a cold cloth. So then he got me a cold cloth and I sat up again. And I was like, I think I'm gonna faint again. Fucking fell back, fainted
No
again.
way.
And then he's like, okay, I think you had a seizure, because I posture when I faint. So it can look like a seizure, but it's not an actual seizure. So he called 911. The paramedics came. They did my blood pressure. It was like so low. I was like, I didn't take care of myself at that time. I ate like shit. I didn't drink water, all this stuff. Right. So then they stand me up, take my blood pressure, and I fainted again when they stood me up. And so they're like,
Oh
you need to go to the hospital. And so they took me to the hospital, and in the ambulance they did an EKG, and then the paramedic was like, you have a problem with your heart. And I was like there's an inverted wave or something in your heart that we can see. And I'm like, oh my God. Like, and at this time I was actually waking up in the middle of the night in the weeks before with what I didn't know at the time, but with panic attacks. So
no.
I didn't know that though, because I was not conscious to what panic attacks were. And so I was waking up, and so I was like, it's my heart. Like I have a heart problem. Like it was just confirmed. So then I go to the emergency room. They do all these tests. They do another EKG. And then the doctor tells me, yeah, that paramedic is like new and doesn't know what she's talking about. You don't have a heart problem. And I'm like,
Oh.
wow, are you fucking kidding me? I'm in the fucking ambulance being told that I have a heart problem, man. Like seriously, you guys got to get your shit together here.
Oh man.
Yeah. And so long story short, that kind of set me into a like really bad part of hypochondria with like really questioning my body, because I had never lost control like that. So in the weeks after that, I felt nauseous. I felt dizzy. I thought I was going to faint because I had fainted before, not really knowing why. Right. And I didn't know I had anxiety. So I didn't know. So then this whole period set off this really weird existential like thing for me. And I literally one day was like, I'm going to quit my job. I'm going to become a nursing assistant. I'm going to go to school to be a nurse, and I'm going to be a nurse. Literally quit my job, signed up for a nursing assistant program, got a job at John Muir, like had to go jump through some hoops and talk to lots of people, got a job at John Muir, did like 4 nursing prereqs in 2 semesters, 1 in a summer, which was ridiculous. Like I killed myself, man. I wanted to get into the top choice nursing school because I just wanted to. everybody told me I was crazy. They're like, you're not going to be able to get A's. And I'm like, yes, I will. Like, fuck you guys. Like, of course I'll be able to. And I just went into super achiever mode. I was revving my body up like crazy. And then working at John Muir, I remember the first day at John Muir, I was working as a float pool CNA. I worked in oncology. And I think I'm pretty sheltered, honestly, for the most part, like in regards to just like, I didn't really see the shitty parts of life growing up. Like I'm very fortunate to have had like, you know, like loving parents, and I've always lived in like a decent area. And like, I didn't really see like, you know, I had trauma in my own life with like my family and things that we had to deal with, like addiction and stuff. But I didn't really have like, I didn't see like really, really shitty stuff.
Yeah.
And then when I went into the hospital, I saw things that like, I saw a whole new world and environment that like I had never seen before. Like people dying of all these crazy like conditions like I'd never even heard of. And then all of a sudden, what I started to do was every single person that I would see, like every single traumatic scenario, every single incident, every single type of cancer, every single type of heart issue became a possibility for me. And so I started taking everybody's experiences and relating them to myself. So like as a fellow person that worked not only as a nursing assistant, but like in hospice, so people dying, how did you handle seeing that stuff?
Yeah. You know what's interesting is I get that question a lot. And for me, being a nursing assistant, just a nursing assistant, was a lot more difficult because what I saw was a lot of people fighting death and like non-acceptance of the inevitable, which is like so common. We're all fighting the fact that we're dying right now. Like we're all trying to fight that fact. And that truth is a really hard truth to accept. When I became a hospice, I got into it on accident. Like I used to basically go into people's homes, and I tried to work in a nursing home, and the patient to caregiver ratio was so sad for me. In Minnesota, it's like 1 to 10 or 1 to 15 at a lot of our nursing homes, and getting 15 to 10 people ready in the morning, and like it just I felt so bad. Like I felt like I couldn't give people my time, and I couldn't like care for them that the way that they wanted to be cared for. And that was like, for me, that was the most difficult thing. So I started working for an independent agency where I would go to people's homes and take care of it was like one-to-one care. And I got called to pick up a shift in a hospice situation. And I said, sure, because I wasn't really totally sure of what hospice was at the time. And I loved it because I had the most real, it was this woman, and she had a pretty bad terminal cancer. And just sitting with her and having a conversation around death and the fact that she seemed so at peace and so comfortable and so happy and so calm was like, I had never seen that before. It was just like always like death, it's so scary. But she had talked, I mean, just to hear about her life, it was just a matter of sitting down with her, and she felt like she had lived a full life. She felt grateful. She felt fulfillment. And it was almost like, I want to talk to more people in hospice and see if they all feel this way. So I just kept doing it. And generally that was the conversations that were had, were how beautiful my life was. I'm so grateful for what's happened, and I'm ready to go. And I feel like it was almost like this feeling of when I'm gone, I'm not going to be gone. Like maybe my physical body won't be here anymore, but there's something more. And I don't know if it's heaven or whatever, you know, whatever you want to call it. But that was like, to me, so beautiful.
Well, that's amazing. I can see how that experience would be profound. Like the experience I had the people that like were not near death, but they were like being they were holding on based on Western medicine, so crazy interventions and like pharmaceuticals and stuff. Like I remember there was this guy I'll never forget. He could no longer walk. He had like bacterial infections all over his leg. He had like everything under the sun. He had COPD. He had, I mean, oh my gosh, he had a catheter in permanently, and I had to collect his urine. It was like thick red fucking syrup. Okay.
Oh.
he had COPD. So when we gave him a bath, we could not leave him on his back for more than like 15 seconds or else he couldn't breathe. He had oxygen on 24/7. Yeah, he couldn't walk. And I remember him telling me like, he could talk, like he was like fine in regards to like when he's sitting up and he's fine. But he would tell me like, go outside because I sit here in this bed and I think about the fact that I will never be able to go fishing with my son ever again.
Wow.
He's like, go outside, do what you want to do, like go live. And then at this time, I mean, even now, I still don't really know what living means sometimes, like, you know, living. So I remember I panicked. I was like, oh my gosh, like I need to go live. But like, what does that mean? Like, I don't want to be like this guy stuck in a bed and never able to do the things that I want to do again. And then I just looked at him and how he was, you know, given a cocktail of medicine every single day. And all he drank were Sprites and all he ate were lemon cookies, like all day on repeat. You know, he'd have his meals. And I'm just like, somebody needs to help this guy. Like, change his diet or like put him in a wheelchair and bring him outside or like something like, and it was just the way that the system, I know people do their best, you know, even nurses in the role, they complain that they, like you said, they don't have enough, you know, patient, like the ratio is off.
Yeah.
But man, it was eye-opening for me. And I still feel like I am trying to recover from just the stories that I saw and like what I heard and the people. And like, I wish I would have had more of an experience like you. I shouldn't even say that because my experience makes me right now. I don't want to like discount my experience, but I struggle with it still.
That was a good catch. That was a good catch.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, you know, I feel super lucky that I got like catapulted into that role because I had some experiences like that you're talking about. The COPD is a huge one. I remember my first day on the job, actually. I worked for this guy who had COPD and they're like, okay, you're going to go to this guy's house and you're going to take him to an eye appointment. And I'm like, okay, perfect. Like, awesome. So I get there. They didn't give me any other details. They just said, go to this guy's appointment, bring him home. That's it. It's going to be super easy. It'll be your first one. I'm like, cool. It's supposed to be 3 hours. I get there and he's like this patient that you described. He's got COPD. He can't even walk like 5 feet without needing to sit down. And like, I don't know, like for people listening who haven't been around somebody with COPD, it's like frightening. Like you literally, they sound like they're going to die. Like they're like, like gasping for air. And you're like sitting there like, oh my God, how can I help you? And you can't. But that's like normal. It's like totally normal. Like that's how they breathe. So I'm like trying to get this guy from his house to his attached garage. So he maybe has to go like 40 feet, right? So when I get there, I assess the situation and realize like this is going to be a lot more of a shit show than I thought it was going to be. Like I was not prepared. And so I'm just like following behind, trying to be like as supportive of this guy as I can. Like, you can do it. Like I followed behind him with this like little office wheelie chair. And like every 5 feet, he would like sit down and like be like gasping for air. And I'm like thinking to myself, because it's like the first time I've ever been with somebody with COPD, like he's going to fucking die. Like he's going to fucking die. I don't know what to do. So finally I get him to the car like 40 minutes later. We're like 20 minutes late to his appointment. And we start going down the driveway. And I'm like, you were so great. Like you did a great job. Good job. Like we're here. And I'm like, okay, got this. Like we got him to, you know, got his like transportable oxygen into the car, like getting out of the driveway. And all of a sudden he's like, oh my God. And I'm like, oh, are you okay? Like, I'm like, what's going on? It's like, I shit my pants. I just shit my pants. And I'm like, fuck, oh my God. So then I'm like, oh, and I'm like, I didn't know what to say because I felt so bad. So I was like, it's okay. Sometimes I shit my pants too, which is like a total lie. Like, I mean, like when I was a baby, sure, but like, and so like, I just like driving back up the driveway, you know, like get it out and like, help. And of course then he's like even more stressed.
I'm just so stuck on like the fact that you just were like totally normalized it. Like I do it sometimes too.
Like oh my God, I felt so bad because I was like this poor guy, he was like so traumatized. And then I was also like, I'm realizing like as he's like telling me he's shitting his pants, like his breathing is getting worse. So then I'm like, oh my God, here we go again. Like he's gonna have a heart attack. So I'm like trying to like normalize it. Like it's not a big deal, you know? So then like his breathing is worse. And then we like go back inside. and like, you know, get him changed and everything, bring him back. And it ended up being like an 8-hour day. It was supposed to be like a 3-hour appointment, but oh my God, I feel that like, oh,
well, you don't even realize like, air, like being able to breathe,
yes.
like the littlest things that when I saw in the hospital with people, like there was a lady I remember where, she had some condition. They were trying to like figure it out. Like that's why she was there, but she couldn't stand up without fainting.
Oh, wow.
You literally couldn't stand up without fainting. And for somebody that's, you know, I have a phobia of fainting because of my experience. I need to stop saying that, man. You know what? From this day, I'm going to stop saying that because I keep fucking saying that. And it's another catch that I'm saying that for myself. I keep saying I have a phobia of fainting. So, of course, I'm going to have a fucking phobia of fainting if I keep saying it over and over. Anyway, I had that experience.
That was a good catch.
So I'm hypersensitive to it. And so I remember seeing this lady and it was like all day they were like trying to get her up. And like every time she got up, she would just like faint. And I was just like, wow, like what a state of existence. Like some of these people, they're living, or like other people, like there was a lady who, she has congestive heart failure, like severe. So it's like her heart can fail her, you know, and it's like, and her heart will fail her. And it's like living with that reality. It's like the state of existence. So I think what happened is I then, overcompensated and tried to now control my body so much to prevent myself from ever getting to that state of existence. So I'm like, gallons of green juice, like help myself. But yeah, no, the stories, man, but I'm so thankful because that really opened my eyes. Without that whole transformative period of like shit that I went through, seeing all of that, I don't know that I would have had the motivation or incentive to start taking care of my health, because that was a kicker for me. It was like, oh my gosh, like we don't have, we have a choice and we don't have a choice. That's why we have free will. It's like, I feel like to some degree our lives are predestined in some way, or like, but we still have the choice, right? So it's like right now I could just start eating McDonald's every day. I could start drinking sodas. I could start drinking alcohol. I could start smoking cigarettes. Those are all my choices. And I could end up in the hospital. And that's what I always thought. I was like, I don't want to die from a chronic illness wasting away in a hospital. Like that was my fear. That is my fear. And so it's making those little choices now to prevent that, because you invest in your health now or later, right? Either you invest, like I feel like so many people just have an aversion to like buying healthy food, or like, even me the other night, like I was like buying goji berries and mulberries, and like it was like fucking like $13 for like a pack like this big, right? But I mean, I use them sparingly, and I'm like, these are superfoods and they're anti-inflammatory agents and they help with cancer and all this stuff. And I'm like, either I can spend $14 on that now, where I probably would spend it on something else stupid like a pizza or whatever, right? Or you can spend it on the pizza and then get sick, over years and years and years of abuse to your body. And then you have to spend money on, endless pharmaceuticals and all that other shit later. So it's like, you got to pick one, you don't have a life unscathed, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, you really don't. Yeah, you really don't. And it's so hard because some people just, first of all, like there are some people that just don't even have access to it, but the people that do have access to it, it's like getting that, it's so expensive to eat that way. It's so expensive to do this. Well, to be honest, like a good bag of beans and rice is like $3, like buy a bag of beans and rice.
It's really, well, compared to how much
and it's just
on fast food, like how much are you spending on restaurants? There was a girl I used to work with would constantly complain that she couldn't eat healthy because she has a family of 5. She couldn't, she couldn't afford healthy food for her kids, but they would go out to straight up like restaurants like every single night, like BJ's and like all these other restaurants. And I'm like, so you're going to a restaurant and spending like $12.95 on one meal for one person in one sitting. Do you know how much $12.95 can buy one person like across meals? If you really get down to it, it's like programmed responses, excuses, non-thought out verbiage is all that is.
Yes. And I'm a part, it's like, and I'm a part of the problem too. Like my goal is to figure out how to talk. I don't even know if it's that. I was going to say how to talk to people and not have them take things personally.
Why do you say you're part of the problem? What do you mean by that?
I mean, like, there's got to be some like bridge of information that I'm not sharing properly that's not helping somebody get something.
Well, people
Does that
have
make
to
sense?
want to receive the information though. That's where I feel like the disconnect is. Like you can say the smartest damn thing ever, like something super profound, but if somebody isn't in the space to receive it because mainly I feel like the issue these days is because people are so reactive. So
Mhm.
people aren't even in the space to listen. Instead, they're quick to defend themselves and quick to shoot you an opposing point. So,
Yeah.
I mean, even if you have the best damn information in the
Yeah.
world,
Sometimes it's also though, like, I think one thing that happens is I'm so caught up in my shit that I don't even like listen to why they're making the choices that they're making and like hearing what their rationale is. And I think that's where I come in. Is like part of the problem is sometimes I just go across and I don't even like listen to their perspective. Cause like,
so then maybe you're a little reactive.
yeah, it's like I think it's like a perpetual circle of like I just get so excited because I feel great and I want other people to feel great. And I just assume that they don't feel great because I'm like, I assume that if you eat, my assumption is that if based upon my experience is that if you eat McDonald's, you're gonna feel like shit. And maybe there are people out there, just hypothetically speaking, like there are probably people out there that feel really great eating McDonald's. And who am I to tell them that McDonald's is going to make them feel like shit? I can encourage them to make a different choice, but if they're not ready to hear that or hear that information, or if they feel great, that's fine. My goal is to like not more so like shame people or even tell them facts. It's just to be curious, like get people to be curious and
Well,
say like, yeah,
see then what goes from there, what would be a good bridge there is like I think you just hit it on the head. So if you're saying that you assume people feel like shit by eating McDonald's and then you approach the situation that way, they're not going to receive the information because they don't feel like shit, right? Maybe they're ignorant
right.
to how they're feeling inside. So then that's where the listening comes into play and being curious, because then you need to approach that person from a different angle, right? A different
Yes.
angle as opposed to feeling like shit. Maybe it's the quality of the food. Maybe it's long-term effects of what the food is going to do. Maybe it's the sustainability piece that you were talking about of like, is this food sustainable? Like there's so many different angles that you can approach people with things that I feel like sometimes we're so stuck in our own narrative of like, this is how we felt. We this is how we felt, so this is what we assume that everybody else is feeling, so this is what I need to tell you to fix the problem, as opposed to really listening, approaching it from all different angles, and then hearing what angle that you can approach with that person in front of you specifically, target that, then maybe we would be able to reach more people that way.
Yeah. Or just even like listening or not even or and just like listening to them and like hearing them out and like yeah, it's really just listening to somebody else's story. That's why I usually most of the time I don't even have like conversations with people. I don't even tell people anything. I really just like have people answer the questions for themselves, like how do you feel, like what, tell me about what you eat, how do you feel, like if people ever ask me about how I'm eating or what I'm eating, say like how do you feel, what are you eating, like do you think that should be different, and instead of like inserting my ideas, I can at least try to hear them and hear their perspective and move forward towards some sort of understanding. It's more of just trying to understand where people are coming from.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, wow, we've been at this for a while, and I know we're kind of getting to the tail end because you got to go soon. So
Yeah.
I want to wrap this up, and I want to actually I was thinking about it. I never really go anywhere, and I really want to travel, and I was like, you know what? Maybe I'll travel and I'll see Julia's TED Talk. So I want to hear when it is.
Yeah,
And
yeah, yeah, yeah.
I can like visit you and stuff. That would be
Yeah, that would be so cool. Come out to Minnesota. April is actually a good time to come out to Minnesota. It's springtime, so all the flowers are blooming, hopefully. I mean, it does sometimes like snow here in June, but that's very rare. But
I've never been to Minnesota, so
it's a good
I'm
time.
gonna we'll stay in touch, of course, and I'll get
Yeah.
the information on that. But for now, um, is there anything like parting words, anything you want to say? Don't feel pressured like you need to. So if you've said everything, you know, so I feel like in the first couple episodes, people like get panicked at this time because they're like, shit, like parting words, like they like feel like they need to come up with something and you totally don't need to. But just like where people can find you, I'm going to put your information and stuff, you know, down below in like the description and stuff. But, you know, if you want to direct people somewhere, maybe your TED Talk, whatever.
For sure. So I'll be giving a TED Talk at Hamline University on April 5th. The time is still TBD. In the meantime, if you have any questions, you can hit up my Instagram. I also have a food Instagram with my partner, Chase. It's called v.ganofficial. We're working on the name. And then my parting words are just be kind to yourself. And you don't need a mirror to see your reflection. That's some words that I've been living by that I'll let marinate is you don't need a mirror to see your reflection.
Wow. You don't need a mirror to see your reflection. That's good. I say we end with that, man. Let everybody know on that. I could dive into that statement, but I don't want to because I think it's more powerful to just let people sit with that and just let it brew inside. I love it. Well, I'm going to stop the broadcast and then you and I can keep talking.
Awesome.
Cool. Thank you, Julia. Thank you so much for your time. Amazing talk. I love the times where like 2.5 hours goes by with like a fucking blink of an eye because you're just, you know, immersed in conversation. So I always appreciate the people that I can have these conversations with because not every conversation is created equal.
No, seriously, that was so good. Wow. Thank you so much. Are we still live?
Yes, we are. I'm going off in 3, 2, 1.